Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lorehammer. It's a podcast about 40K. Yo, hey, I'm Mark. We've got Christian joining us.
Hi, always a pleasure. Never a
the
burden.
Naughty Inquisitor, who likes to experiment on Orks, Tyranids, and probably family members, I'd imagine, too.
Orks and Tyranids are my family.
Yeah, okay, that
That's
checks
how
out.
I spread.
And we got Vacation James back from it.
That's
How
right.
was it? Was it
It was
worth
good,
it?
dude. I got the sun. I water skied. It was great.
Yeah, but we also got an inbox full of hate mail now, so
I read some of it. There were some good ones in there.
there was
some good ones. I'll pick my best one for the end of the episode.
I think my all-time favorite hate mail included the words, "I think Christian is a better father than James."
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's deep.
That hurts.
And we got a 4x4 going on. We got our fourth chair joining us this episode. Gerald, welcome.
Hello. I don't know how I got here. I just saw an invitation and just popped right in the door.
Yeah, man. Well, you're my favorite listener lore buddy, and you're going to read some lore here with us too there, little fella.
Ooh, fun stuff.
Gerald is from the podcast Grimlore. Go check that out. Yeah, you want to give us one shout out? I know you've been on our show a lot, and I don't know if you've ever really shouted out Grimlore before.
If you like Warhammer Fantasy, when you're done listening to Lorehammer, come on, hop over to Grimlore. We talk about Warhammer Fantasy, maybe a little bit of Age of Sigmar, maybe a couple other grim and dark settings, but mostly fantasy. So
Sometimes
There you go.
Dragon Age.
sometimes Dragon Age, sometimes Halo, sometimes Destiny. So we're a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah, cool. No, it's a fun show. I've been on a couple of times and always a good time. So some small housekeeping before we get to the topic of the Octarius War. We got a little nid on Orc with Imperial running interference in this episode. But before we get there, we got some exciting news. So we have a website up and running, and I believe it's probably just like www.lorehammer.com.
it's a Lorehammer podcast.
What are we working with?
It's Lorehammer podcast.
Lorehammer podcast.
Yeah.
Cool. And you might ask, why do we have a website? Well, we want to start selling you guys cool exclusive merch. You know, people have been begging for dice, and I hear you. I listen. So yeah, if you want to buy some more exclusive dice, you know, we're going to be running all types of exclusive merch on that website. People heard me on the last episode talk about the Magic the Gathering cards that we're making. So yeah, go check out that. And yeah, we're just, you know, if you want some cool Lorehammer dice, the dice we're selling this time are solid red with black pips, I believe. It might be the other way. Yeah, no, there's solid red.
I can pop that up. I think that's the. You had them in here, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Oh,
Some
maybe
point.
I did.
Somewhere.
Oh, well.
Well, don't
you
give it
know.
all away.
Hey,
Okay, so a dice has how
They're
many
not in
sides
there.
again?
Depends on the dice, actually.
Oh,
that
shit.
is controversial.
More than two, though.
The point is, they're dice. They're red.
Yeah.
They got the Lorehammer logo on it. They are on the website. You can't quite make a purchase yet. We haven't set that up, but you can take a look at them, and we'll
Lust after them for
Yeah.
a little bit.
lust-
Go to the
yeah,
website
lust
and
a little
you
bit.
know you follow a process and we'll work it out. We'll make sure we get some more Lorehammer dice out there. The other thing I wanted to quickly mention was the Warlords of Terror Discord event that we did last week and the Magic the Gathering card deck that we're building around Old Terra. If you want information on that contest, definitely go listen to last week's episode because we're taking lore submissions. We're going to do a Warlord lore round robin where we battle people off. And then, you know, the winners of that get to be put into the Magic deck cards. So go check out that episode if you're interested in that. Yeah, it's definitely been pretty cool. The one crazy factor that has changed since we recorded was somebody reached out and basically said, "You suck at AI art." And I said, "Fair." He said, "I'm a lot better than you." I said, "Fair." And no, Gothic Garnish on Instagram, he offered to make our cards. And honestly, he's an artist. He'll take AI art, then put into Photoshop, put on Aquilas, do all this stuff. So
Fine
it's
detail
actually
work.
super lore accurate. Yeah. So he's on board to help us make this Magic the Deck cards. So our artwork just skyrocketed in quality. So we'll get more information on that as it progresses. But yeah, check out the website. It should be pretty cool. LorehammerPodcast.com.
Yeah, LorehammerPodcast.com. You got it.
Live streaming. We're live streaming. Join the Patreon at 8:30 Central Standard Time. And the next one will be basically every Friday night. The next one's August 9. You just have to wait for a link on Patreon, and then we send it. You click, you're in the show. It's cool. We have a chat room here. We got call-ins at the end of the show, so people kind of filter in and join us, and it's a pretty good time. You can also check out our YouTube if you want to see our base.
I don't know why you want to do that, but
Yeah.
we have a cool
And the
slideshow.
artwork, it's not worth it.
No, you're supposed to upsell the slideshow.
Oh yes, the slideshow
The
is perfect.
slideshow.
I put a
It's
lot
very
of
relevant.
effort.
It's very relevant.
Come for
And
the
I am very
slideshow, listen
good.
to the voices.
That's right. Yeah. Listen to my sweet, sweet, sultry voice.
And now your evening with Lorehammer.
That's right.
SMR.
That's right.
All right.
I'll put you right to sleep.
And if you want to join the show, you can always join the Patreon, and that will get you in through our Discord. Mark, you said you wanted me to shout at people about the Discord. No.
Yeah, man.
Everyone's ears are broken.
Yeah,
that was one of the James complaints, by the way, is that your voice was too loud. So
Okay.
welcome.
I'm told I have to enunciate my words.
It's audible. It's too loud. Yeah, no, it's kind of cool. Go join our Patreon. Throw us a buck. It really goes a long way, man. I always just think, I see how many downloads a month we get, and I think if everyone gave us a buck, that'd be spicy. All of a sudden, we could. I could afford Warhammer miniatures again. I think at that point, maybe
Almost there.
maybe almost, but yeah, definitely support the show. Shows go away if you don't support them. So give us a check out on Warhammer Patreon.
Mark will fire us if he does not make this quota by the end of the month. So.
That's right.
Yep.
Starting with Christian. Though.
In his last
All
ever
right.
appearance.
Yeah, let's jump into the Octarius War. So I've put a lot of thought into this episode on how to kind of how to try to put it out there for you guys. When I originally wrote the script for this one, it kind of came out as a Black Legion episode. And I don't know if anyone remembers that deep lore where basically you have this war where the factions are trying to one-up each other. And unlike real life when this happens and people are doing interesting one-up situations, it's just GW one-upping their own writing. And then this happened. And then this happened. And I found when writing this episode, I got a lot of that happening. So I changed it up completely. And we're going to do more of like an open format. So when we're going through this, the Octarius War is huge. There's so much stuff. There's so many characters. We're not going to talk about everything, but there's a lot of cool stuff that comes from it that we should definitely focus in on, that is more than just, back and forth battle zones.
Sounds good.
Fair enough.
So let's set the stage for the Octarius War. The prologue. Whispers of doom. In the far reaches of the galaxy, whispered rumors spread among the orc tribes of Octarius about a new insidious threat. A shadow had fallen over distant worlds where entire populations vanished, leaving behind only desolate wastelands and eerie silence. The first encounter, the initial clash, came along without warning. Orc scouts on a routine patrol stumbled upon a small Tyranid vanguard force, grotesque creatures that moved with unnatural predatory grace. The orcs, ever eager for a fight, charged headlong into the fray, only to be overwhelmed by the sheer savagery of the Tyranid assault. Few survived to report the encounter, their tales filled with nightmare visions of chittering horrors. Dark arrival. Soon after, the skies above outlying orc settlements darkened, as if heralding a storm. But instead of rain and heavens, rained death in the form of mycetic spores. These biological drop pods crashed into the ground, unleashing swarms of ravenous gaunts that tore through the settlements with relentless ferocity. The desperate defense. Orc war bosses, alarmed by the sudden onslaught, began to fortify their positions, rallying their tribes and erecting crude but formidable defenses. The orcs, driven by their innate bloodlust, relished the challenge, their camps abuzz with the anticipation of battle. And that brings us to, how did this all happen? And that's the Inquisitor's gambit. Unbeknownst to the orcs, Inquisitor Kryptman of the Imperium had enacted a desperate gambit, foreseeing a potential for Tyranid threats. He thought to use the orcs as an unwitting shield, hoping that their ferocity might stall an advancing Hive Fleet Leviathan. He manipulated events from the shadows, ensuring that the Tyranids and the orcs would be drawn into brutal conflict. So this is kind of how I kind of remember the Octarius War happening. We had this grand big war that was orchestrated by the Imperium, where they basically sacrificed a bunch of worlds to try to stop this orc threat. And there was this one line that they kept saying where it's like, whoever wins this war is gonna win the galaxy, because when you have these two races evolving after each other and have this evolution arms race, you know, whoever wins that is really gonna conquer.
Yeah, because it just makes them more powerful, right? Like they're just adapting to each other and then becoming. If you ever seen Superman versus Doomsday, where Doomsday just like kind of absorbs and adapts to a new threat and just becomes infinitely more powerful, it's almost like orcs in their biology naturally evolve to meet a threat, and then the Tyranids also naturally evolve to overcome threats. So it's just like a never-ending cycle of becoming more and more powerful on either side.
I think from like a basic strategy perspective, though, it kind of makes sense. You like, okay, you have two enemies that are very strong and you don't want to fight them. So you reserve your strength and let them fight each other. That makes like pretty logical sense. I think the only problem is that Tyranids seem to have infinite resources, so you can't really like stop them that way. You need like demons to come out of the warp and just eat them all.
Something that they can't.
You need a Deus Ex Machina to save you. So
So what you're saying is they should funnel all the Tyranids into the warp.
now
Now that's a real Inquisitor.
I don't like it. I don't think that's gonna work well for anyone. But yeah, that's kind of the prologue, and I remember this being this cool scene. And they did eventually come out with the Octarius War campaign book, where they play out what actually kind of happens. So we get a lot of information about what happens. And let's start with some of the crucial characters of this story. And in my mind, when going through it, I figured the three crucial characters were Inquisitor Kryptman. It was the Overfiend of Octarius, the Orc warlord, and it's the Swarm Lord from High Fleet Leviathan. Those are the three main characters, kind of. They all interact with each other. They're all the ones pulling the strings. So let's start with the Inquisitor.
All right. Inquisitor Fidus Kryptman of the Ordo Xenos. Kryptman is primarily focused on combating the Tyranid menace, dedicating his life to understanding and thwarting this Xenos threat. Kryptman is highly intelligent, determined, and ruthless. His dedication to protecting the Imperium leads him to make morally and ethically questionable decisions. Yeah, he's like known to throw other worlds in the path of destruction to like save other planets, and like, yeah, he doesn't care. Like the ends always justify the means to him, which is kind of standard, I guess, for the Imperium, but he's especially cruel about it.
Well, even in general, though, the like destroying planets is not standard practice. You only do
That's
that.
true.
That's like a last resort.
Desperate.
Even like the Emperor was like very against having to do that,
Yeah,
unless it was absolutely necessary. So
I mean, that's kind of the start of the meme of the Inquisition, just exterminatus. But wasn't he blasted for being too excessive by the Inquisition itself?
Yeah. And that says something about you if the Inquisition thinks you are too extreme.
Is that a badge of honor, though? Is that like a compliment? How do you take that as an Inquisitor?
As a promotion.
You're the most inquisitorial Inquisitor.
Excellent.
Right. Next up in the ring, we have the early encounters with the Tyranids. So Kryptman first encountered the Nids during the initial invasion of High Fleet Behemoth. He played a critical role in identifying the nature of the threat and rallying Imperial forces to combat it. He conducted extensive research on Tyranid biology and tactics, developing effective strategies to combat them. His insights were invaluable in several key battles against the High Fleets. Like I said, mostly just throwing other planets in their path. Scorched Earth policy. Kryptman is infamous for his use of exterminatus, a last resort measure to destroy entire worlds to deny the Tyranids biomass. The tactic, while effective in slowing the Tyranid advance, resulted in the loss of countless lives and entire planetary systems. You can't argue with results.
I don't want either of you in government positions. It's unfortunate because I know one of you is. I won't say who.
Listen, we got a nuke. Let me explain. One notable example of this destruction is the planet of Chordelis, is one of the most well-known instances of Kryptman employing exterminatus, sacrificing billions to halt the Tyranid progression.
Yeah. It's just one of those things, though. Like, what do you do? That planet is doomed either way. So you can either let the Tyranids feed, because the Imperium has a very long arm, but it is not infinite. And a lot of those planets probably could not have been defended in the first place, Or
by the time defense is rallied, they're gone anyway. It is an interesting point. Like,
Like I
The-
said,
the way-
you can't argue with results.
Well, the
He's not
Tyranids do
wrong.
just like when they go to a place, it's gone. There's nothing left there but a rock,
Yeah,
right?
they strip
Even
it
you
of-
can't even mine minerals from it. So, and I think that's just it makes sense to kind of go with that strategy of just
scorched earth.
you might as well take away the Tyranid's biomass. It's something you don't have to kill later.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is effective. Like you are denying them resources that they need. Yeah, which is exactly why he does his whole gambit. So in the Octarius sector, it's perhaps his most controversial decision, where he orchestrated the redirection of High Fleet Leviathan into the Orc-held Octarius sector. Ah, I see why they did that now. Octarius.
Yes, and WOG is war.
It all makes sense.
Ah,
His intention was to pit the
Ah.
Tyranids against the Orcs, creating a prolonged conflict that would weaken both Xenos threats. Fool. Using a captured gene stealer, Kryptman lured the Tyranids into the heart of the Orc Empire. This resulted in the brutal Octarius War, a massive and ongoing conflict between the two Xenos species. And that's our champion
Yeah.
from the Imperium.
again,
Yeah,
I think
so
it's a sound
he's quite-
strategy. It's a sound strategy in any other universe other than 40K.
Where this will backfire entirely.
Yes, of course.
We just
Yeah,
can't have
yeah,
nice
yeah.
things.
That's right.
No. Yeah, he's such an interesting character because he appears all over the galaxy in so many different areas. But it's always definitely Tyranid focused. You know, to be the first guy to kind of categorize and realize the threat of Tyranids, that's quite the honorific horror there to bestow upon a man. And yeah, it's like, you know, he just sees planet after planet gets devoured, and he sees the entire Ultramarine chapter, you know, one of the best chapters in the Imperium during the, you know, the first Tyrannic War, almost get destroyed, you know, all this stuff. So, you know, as much as that is crazy, what do you do?
Yeah, they're definitely in a desperate
Yeah.
situation.
Do you think
Like,
then
yeah,
do you think the criticisms of him are based on faulty understanding of how big of a threat the Tyranids are?
That could be an interesting thing, because, like, you know, we know way more about like the 40K world than like the average citizen probably would, you know. Do they know what Tyranids are, or is it just the Xenos in the first place? And yeah, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, because like
Um,
if you're one of the High Lords of Terra, you hear a Xenos took out a world. Well, great, it's Tuesday, so that happens all the
Yeah.
time, and they don't really notice that it's they can't see this bigger thing at play. Whereas he's like, I've seen these things. This is like the biggest threat
yeah,
to basically everything, and so he's like, I have to do extreme things or we're going to get rocked. And so that
Yeah.
kind of makes sense to me that would be his. He may just think no one else knows what they're talking about, but I've seen this stuff.
yeah. That's the cool thing is too. So he does do Exterminatus, a little trigger friendly, but he also is very involved with the Death Watch, and later on we'll get into one of the little campaigns that he goes on. But even the way he captures Gene Stealers, he uses the Death Watch to capture them and stuff. So he's a very cool character. You know, he's got a cool retinue of people that follow him, and he's just got all the resources available to do what he needs to do for this job.
And he is clever. Like, you can give him that much. Like, maybe he didn't know that this plan would backfire, but at least it's a plan.
At least it's a plan.
He's doing something about the
Yeah.
Tyranids. No one else seems to
Yeah.
be doing anything about them.
If your house is
Yeah.
infested, you got to do something. You can't just sit there.
Yeah, because like what I was referencing about like sending the Tyranids into the warp. That's like spoilers in the devastation of Ball, but it's been out for a while. So, but that's how they eventually get the Tyranids to be defeated. Is just like, oh, we had this huge demon swarm come in and kill them all for us, because otherwise we would have lost.
And now you got demons. Is it
Well,
an upgrade?
luckily it all worked out for them in that case.
This is like
but-
Australia all over again.
Literally,
That's how you get
better the
demons.
devil you know.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, in the other corner, we have the champion for the Orcs, the Overfiend of Octarius. He's the supreme warlord of the Octarius Orc Empire, but it is a title, so there have been many. He leads and unifies the Orc forces against the Tyranid invasion, maintaining dominance over the Octarius sector. The Overfiend is typically as brutal as he is cunning, fiercely aggressive, and possessing an unyielding will, and his authority over the Orcs is cemented by his combat prowess and strategic mind, adapting to the Tyranids as much as the Tyranids adapt to new threats. I think orcs are sometimes underestimated in how clever they actually can be.
Yeah, he's more on the cunning side versus
Well,
brutal.
he could be equally both, and both could be at a higher level. But yeah, orcs are capable of adapting to threats. They're not just totally mindless killing machines.
It's probably like on the higher end of orcs, yes.
Yeah.
But most of them are not.
Obviously. No, and again, it goes with like that orc evolution. Like even when you get into like the beast, right? Like he's really smart. So like the bigger following an orc gets, the more intelligent and again cunning and brutal they become.
Yeah, and like the more enemies, like they will drop their pistols if they're fighting on a like medieval feudal world, you know, with
that only has swords.
Yeah, they will drop the pistols because they want that fight, and then they will evolve up to meet that other enemy. But yeah, they're brutal, they're cunning.
Yeah, and they match the threat that they're put against. The Overfiend is usually rose to the prominence by uniting the desperate orc clans of the Octarius sector, forging a massive and cohesive war machine. Under his leadership, the Orc Empire expanded its territory, establishing dominance over the sector and preparing for any external threats. His aggressive expansion ensures a steady flow of resources and men or orc power. There have been at least 4 known Overfiends. Yeah, it's also interesting to note that this is the Octarius sector, so we're not just talking one planet, like we're talking multiple planets. Do you remember, Mark, off the top of your head, how big or what a sector is actually designated? Like, is there a range?
I think it's different, like, because they would lay it out on, like, you don't have a sector with no planets in it, you know, you'd lay it around wherever the actual orbit and places of celestial bodies are.
Yeah, my understanding is it's not a uniform thing. It's not even, I don't even think it's like a number of systems or even a system. I think it's just like, it depends on the scenario, doesn't it?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah, like, and even if you look at like the large scale, like, you know, there's sectors, and then there's the one up where it's, you know, the soul segmentum, you know, so, and if you look at those ones, even they have like the jagged border, and the soul system's very small.
Segmentum. And like the galactic west, which I think it's the galactic west, is super small compared to the galactic east, which is massive.
Yeah. So there's just no uniform of creating.
I don't think so.
Yeah, but it's more than one planet that we're dealing with. At least we can confirm that much.
Yeah, that we can confirm.
There's definitely a bunch.
It's not just like Armageddon.
Yeah. Some of the battle tactics and strategies of the Overfiend: fortifies key positions, turning orc-held worlds into formidable strongholds. Orc engineering and fortifications created almost impregnable defenses. Orc mechs developed increasingly bizarre and powerful weapons to counter the Tyranids. This included massive gargants and other war machines that were used to great effect in battles. That's also kind of cool because there's a lot of room there for like unique orc. What's the word I'm looking for? Adaptation, innovation. Yeah. That's the word I'm looking for. Innovation. Yeah, so like you can get crazy with whatever tech that orcs are known to do.
Weird janky things thrown together that work really well somehow.
Yeah.
Or even like they said, like massive gargants, and including the Tyranid aspect of that, you could maybe have like, I don't know, I like tyrannic war veterans, right, where they're like wearing bits and pieces or making weapons out of Tyranid like bodies. You could do a lot.
Yeah, I think some of the wildest conversions are when they like take a Carnifex and mount an orc on top of it, controlling it like a horse or something.
Yeah, stuff like that, right? Like, you know, stuff that orcs are known for. And in the third corner of this 3-way boxing match, we have the Swarm Lord. He's the supreme commander of the Tyranid High Fleets. He leads the Tyranid invasions with unparalleled strategic and combat prowess, adapting and evolving to overcome any enemy. The Swarm Lord is an embodiment of the hive mind's intelligence and cunning. It is relentless, calculating, and utterly dedicated to the consumption and assimilation of all biological matter. He's engineered. He's not a singular being, but a bio-engineered leader created by the Tyranid hive mind whenever an invasion requires its unparalleled strategic acumen. It is the ultimate expression of Tyranid adaptation and evolution. He's designed to counter the most formidable opponents. The Swarm Lord combines raw combat strength with a deep strategic mind, making it a key asset in major Tyranid invasions. I don't know if I stress this enough, but he is of great strategic intelligence.
Well, my understanding was this might be a little bit of a throwback to the Tyranid episodes, but he's still like a character. He's like a person, right? Because like he appears. There's only a certain number of them. Like there's not like they can't just make more and more and more of them. They're like there's like a maybe like one per hive fleet or something, and they just show up where they need to be because they don't seem to mass produce them.
Yeah, like you would only want one per hive fleet just because of the nature of his role. You only need one. Like he's not a frontline soldier. You only need one strategist. You know, you don't need 2 boat captains. The other thing that kind of makes him interesting, and I always kind of pictured it playing out this way in my mind. Like, so the hive mind births the swarm lord, and then there could be multiple ones going around and dying, and at some point they invade the planet, they conquer the planet, they absorb the planet, and at that point they also absorb the swarm lord back into it, and then at that point they absorb the genetic memory and strategies that it's evolved, and it can pass it on then to the other swarm lords in the fleet.
Yeah,
That
and it
kinda
can
makes
also
sense,
be sorry, go ahead.
because it seems like from what I've been hearing about the books and everything, it always seems to be the same swarm lord that they always talk about, even if it's from in different campaigns and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just like a just salt consciousness that can be like uploaded and downloaded into the hive mind through like the gene pools whenever it's crafted is how I kind of see it.
Yeah,
like, even if he's also killed, as long as they can acquire his body again and his mind and reabsorb it back into the fleet, they can theoretically resurrect him in a new body. And like you said, Mark, like they can download and distribute that information. So they're constantly even learning and upgrading from other campaigns that they're not necessarily directly involved in, which makes them extra deadly.
Yeah. Yeah, and of all the creatures in the galaxy, this is probably one of the most dangerous ones out there.
Yeah, and he's no slouch in like combat either. Like I said, like his brain is one thing, but he's also physically formidable as well.
He's also a psyker too. Like he can shoot warp bolts at you and fry your brain and all that kind of craziness. So
yeah, well, he's connected to like the hive mind through the synaptic control and coordination. Swarmlord enhances the Tyranid synaptic network, ensuring perfect coordination and execution of complex tactics like multi-pronged assaults and ambushes. The Swarmlord rapidly adapts strategies based on real-time battlefield analysis, exploiting enemy weaknesses and adjusting tactics to outmaneuver opponents. Yeah, it's also cool too because like all the Tyranids are linked into this hive mind, so like it's almost like having being able to see through the eyes of every single one of your soldiers, so you can adapt really quickly. There's not that lag time for communication, like. You know, if you're encountering issues on this flank or something, you have to radio it back to command and they have to like give orders back down the chain. Instead, it just like instantly knows, okay, this isn't working. I got to move these guys over here, put artillery fire over there. So, yeah, he's a big deal.
We got a great question. Is there one hive mind or one per hive fleet? You know, when you're talking about the hive mind, it's hard to say because it's intentionally one of those mysterious things where we don't fully know. It's alien. It's truly alien to us. Now, I've always kind of had it that there is only one hive mind, and that controls all the fleets. And like you said, then you have those sub-commanders like the Swarm Lord, and that's how you then control a fleet. But there is only one hive mind that's controlling this whole organism.
According to Lexicanum, the first paragraph is the hive mind is a gestalt collective consciousness of the entire Tyranid race, a psychic embodiment of the Tyranid instincts and racial imperatives to devour and destroy. So
yeah, so I guess that's another good thing to bring up. Like it's a collective of all of them. So there isn't even necessarily a vessel or a body like the Swarm Lord has that this hive mind is in. It's in all of them. It's because of all of them.
Yeah, I like to think about it the way like each one of the synapses in your brain is you, but it's the way they connect together and all of them working together that makes your mind. So each individual Tyranid creature is just synapse. like a synapse in the great brain of the Tyranid hive mind.
Yeah, that's a cool way to look at it.
Cool. All right. So
that's our those are our main guys there. The 3 big baddies. You know, there was a bunch of other characters that they mentioned, like Gazkill Mergic Thraka shows up. Hellbridge shows up in this. Like, there's a bunch of big bads, but those are the three that we focus
main
on.
characters.
Cool. Okay, let's jump into his gambit, Kryptman's gambit. So, in the shadowed recesses of the Imperium, where the light of hope flickers faintly and the vast darkness threatens to consume all, Inquisitor Kryptman, a figure both feared and revered, both are important to have, hatched a plan that would alter the fate of the galaxy plagued by endless war. Known for his ruthless pragmatism and grim foresight, Kryptman Gambit was nothing short of desperate. High-stakes gamble that epitomized the brutal nature of the 41st millennium. So he sees this unseen threat, and in the early 41st millennium, the Octarius sector, a vast and turbulent region of space, became the center of Kryptman's ominous scheme. The sector, a veritable cauldron of conflict and chaos, had long been a battleground for countless factions. But Kryptman's focus was not on the ongoing skirmishes between the Imperium and the Orks, or even the isolated attacks by the Tyranids. His attention was drawn to an encroaching darkness that threatened to obliterate everything in its path. Kryptman's investigation revealed that the Tyranids, a Xenos race that you might have heard of unparalleled veracity and adaptability, were gathering in horrifying numbers within the Octarius sector. The tyrannical swarm, driven by an insatiable hunger, posed an existential threat that could not be ignored. The potential for devastation was staggering, as entire planets could be consumed in unrelenting maw of the Tyranid hive fleets. So I just want to point out too, like, a lot of times people criticize this gambit as like, well, it's kind of like he's like made them just stronger, but they were coming anyway. It's not like they weren't gonna fight and get into conflict with each other without his help. He just spurred the two factions to be more focused on each other rather than the Imperium, which in my opinion means it kind of still working, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, so I'm going to go on because Mark has muted himself.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, no, this wasn't Kryptman's, like, just weird experiment of social situations. What happens here?
If I do this and this.
Yeah, he wasn't just messing around, you know?
He's not a naughty Inquisitor like me.
No,
I like to experiment just for fun.
So the scheme unfolds in a move that was calculated as it was brutal, so very orcish of him. Kryptman devised a plan to contain the Tyranid threat, a scheme that would see him manipulate both allies and enemies in a bid to divert the hive fleets away from the heart of the Imperium. His plan was twofold. First, to orchestrate a series of devastating conflicts that would bleed the Tyranid swarm, and second, to leverage the existing war with the Orks to serve as a distraction. Kryptman's gambit involved a masterful orchestration of deceit and subterfuge. By secretly providing the Orks with information about potential Tyranid weaknesses, he incited them to wage war against the swarm. This would not only drain the Tyranid forces, but also create a massive chaotic battlefield that could be exploited to further Kryptman's gains. The Inquisitor's machinations were deeply entwined with the fabric of the sector's conflict, setting the stage for a bloody, unrelenting war.
Okay. Here's a heretical thought. This sounds like something a Craft World Eldar would do. Think about it.
Are you saying Kryptman is actually an Eldar in disguise?
We may never know.
That's why he's so quick to exterminatus people. Yeah. He's even wiping out humans too. It's the perfect plan. The humans are the Tyranids in this scheme.
God dang it!
It does sound very like Eldarish, because that's always the way an Eldar plot goes. It's like, I'm going to do this super complicated scheme that's going to involve all these little things going off perfectly without a hitch, and unrelentingly, it always backfires to make their situation worse in the end. So it is very Eldari. Yeah. Anyway, so the grim reality of what actually occurred. Kryptman's gambit was a macabre dance of destruction. As the Orks surged into the sector, their unbridled fury met with insidious advance of the Tyranids. The resultant carnage was staggering, with entire worlds being reduced to nothing more than ashes and ruins. The Imperium, caught in the crossfire, could only watch as the galaxy plunged into an abyss of violence and despair. But I mean, it already was, so it's not like it changed too much. Kryptman's plan was, while ingeniously crafted, bore the hallmark of his grim outlook on the universe. The sheer scale of the slaughter was unending waves of Xenos and Orc warfare, and the existential dread of a sector on the brink of annihilation were all part of the grimdark reality that Kryptman had set into motion. His gamble had succeeded in draining the Tyranids into a protracted conflict, but it came at a horrific cost. So yeah, basically it just obliterated this whole area because there's just lots of war. Again, in my opinion,
Standard.
basically what was going to happen anyway because the Tyranids were coming. So it's like, okay, it's all obliterated, but at least the Tyranids are getting rocked in the meantime. Sounds like not the worst thing to me.
Yeah, all I know
an
is I've
absolute
never
win.
I've never heard of the Octarius War before until this war happened, so it must not be that important. It must not be that big a deal, this place.
I mean, nothing is important until the GW says it is. So the legacy of the conflict, of the Gambit. As the Octarius War continued to unfold, the brutal consequences of Kryptman's Gambit became starkly apparent. The sector was left in ruins, scarred by relentless battles and the relentless advance of Cena's forces. The Inquisitor's plan had shifted the balance of power, but it also entrenched a grim reality where the light of hope was all but extinguished. In the annals of the Imperium's dark history, Kryptman's Gambit would be remembered as a grim testament to the lengths to which individuals would go to stave off annihilation. The cost of his plan, though, was a stark reminder of the brutal, unforgiving nature of the universe in which the Imperium struggled to survive. So, again, it's basically status quo, as far as I'm concerned.
Except he's powering up the two enemies
Again,
simultaneously.
but they would have anyway. They were both already there, and the Tyranids were already amassing in the first place.
Sure.
So they would have come into conflict and powered each other up.
But it's also possible that if Kryptman didn't like tip off the Orks in advance to like even the scales, maybe they would have gotten rolled by the Tyranids, and then they would have just moved on.
Okay, so then the Tyranids obliterate every planet and move on.
Sure, but then they wouldn't be like juiced up now, fighting
I don't
the
know,
Orks.
but they're still stuck in there. And sure, they're getting juiced up, but they're stuck.
for now. For now.
I was asked a good question. So why do they exterminate the planets and why don't they exterminate as fleets of the hive fleets? And I was kind of thinking about that. I kind of came up with a couple reasons depending on how they exterminate us. They have the classic like virus bomb where they shoot something that basically turns any organic matter into like liquid goo and like gas, and then one spark sets it off and it glasses the planet. So if you're in space, could you really do that necessarily? Hard to say. Also, like Tyranids might have a way to fight that biological part that turns it all to goop.
I don't know if they can't exterminate us though. It makes sense you couldn't do that in space. The virus bombs are implied not to do anything in space.
You never see them used.
Well, in the Horus Heresy, when they're doing that on Isfahan, they specifically some of the bombs get vented into space and they're inert once they're in space.
Exactly. And then the other form is like cyclonic torpedoes is like the other main kind of, just think massive missile that just cracks the crust of the planet and then it ends the world that way. But if you look at like a picture of a Tyranid hive fleet in space, it's like a bazillion creatures. So to be able to fire a missile past a bazillion creatures to let it hit your mark that's 100,000 kilometers away, it just really is not a practical way of doing it. You can't.
Nothing in 40K is practical.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. Like if you have let's say if you wanted to get maximum destruction, you need it to be in the center so it expands and gets most things, right?
Yeah.
But it's going to hit a billion things, and all the bugs are going to fly in the way as it goes, and so that wouldn't necessarily work.
Not to mention space is also like very vast and empty between those little specks, even in the scale of a hive fleet, right? So even if you do hit it, you're going to hit a few, and then the rest of the hive fleet will be fine.
Yeah.
So you just expend all your munitions, and then there's nothing left to actually fight them when they get to you. So.
There is a third way, and that's like, you send in a Death Watch kill team to try to eliminate the hive fleet. We have some cool stories about that, but I included something in here later on about that, so we'll save that for that. But
little juicy morsel.
That's kind of how I figured, so why are we glassing planets here? Well, there's no other way, man. There just really isn't. You can't blow them up in space because you just can't shoot missiles there or your technology doesn't work.
Yeah, and again, there's always a little bit of suspension of disbelief too, because even having ground wars at all in a lot of cases is completely unnecessary in science fiction.
And where's all the naval battles?
Right, exactly. Give me my
sons of
Gothic.
bitches.
That's okay. When they'll start doing space battles again, when Imperial or Gothic comes back.
Ooh, yeah.
What is that?
spicy.
What was it called?
Yeah,
Battlefleet Gothic. Yeah, when that comes back, they'll start doing space battles again.
Until then, all space fighting is suspended.
That's right. That's right. No models,
No
no story.
yeah.
Okay.
Gerald, take it away.
Nailed it. I don't know
Winning.
if he has that. Is he got the notes, Mark?
I do not have the notes.
That's okay.
Well,
That's
Take it
okay.
away anyways,
Mark,
Gerald.
Mark, go.
Yeah. All right. The Overfiend of Octarius and the brutal dawn of war. In a tumultuous expanse of the Octarius sector, the Orks, an ever-brawling, archaic race, were poised on the brink of monumental clash that would shake the galaxy. At the heart of this maelstrom was the Overfiend of Octarius, a towering figure of brutal strength and cunning, whose ambitions were matched only by his insatiable hunger for battle and dominance. The unfolding war would etch his name in the annals of Orc legend, a saga of fire, fury, and fate sealed in blood. The rise of the Overfiend. The Overfiend of Octarius, an imposing warlord of unparalleled ferocity, emerged in the wreckage of countless battles. Known for his unmatched prowess in combat and charisma that could unify the fractious Orc tribes, the Overfiend was a force of nature. His presence alone could galvanize a warband into a frenzy of destruction. His rise to power was marked by brutal conquests, each victory solidifying his control over the Orc hordes that roamed the sector. Under his command, the Orcs were unified into a fearsome war coalition driven by an unrelenting desire for carnage. The Overfiend's vision for the Octarius sector was clear: total domination. His rule was a blend of sheer brutality and tactical genius, ensuring that the Orc forces were not only numerous, but also highly effective in their ceaseless campaign of destruction. The catalyst for war. The sector's chaos was further fueled by the appearance of the Tyranid threat, an event that would reshape the course of Orc history. The Tyranids, with their ravenous hunger and relentless advance, were a prime target for the Overfiend's ambitions. Sensing an opportunity, he orchestrated a massive offensive against the encroaching Xeno swarm, seeking both to expand his dominion and indulge his warlike inclinations. The Overfiend's war cry echoed through the sector, signaling the start of the cataclysmic clash. His forces surged forward with zeal that only Orcs could muster, eager to prove that their might against the relentless Tyranid hordes. The initial battles were marked by savage ferocity, with the Overfiend himself leading from the front, his towering form a beacon of destruction amidst the chaos of war. The early campaigns. The opening salvos of the Octarius War were marked by intense and bloody engagements. The Overfiend's strategy was straightforward yet brutal: overwhelm and annihilate. His forces, driven by a combination of Orc bloodlust and strategic cunning, launched a series of devastating assaults on the Tyranid swarms. The Orcs reveled in the carnage, their massive war machines and brutal warriors cutting through the Tyranid ranks with gleeful abandon. The Tyranids, for their part, proved to be a formidable foe. The Xenos' adaptability and sheer numbers presented a significant challenge. The battles were fierce and both sides suffering heavy casualties, yet the Overfiend's relentless aggression and the sheer scale of the Orc assault began to shift the momentum in their favor. The sector became a blood-soaked battlefield, with the Orcs' brutal tactics meeting the Tyranids' relentless advance. There's a lot of battles that happen in this time. You know, there's a bunch of planets that they name, and we will get to some of these more specific things. But the flow of the battle, it's like, you know, the Orcs are ready for this. They see the Orcs come into their sector, they lose a couple things, but then they surge forward, and they're happy with it, really.
Yeah, and that's something that to keep in mind. Like, even though it's from the Imperium's perspective, this is like chaotic and destructive and like negative, the Orcs are having the time of their lives. They're loving this.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if we're talking about win conditions for each faction, the Orcs have been winning since day one. So,
yeah.
Any fight is a good fight.
Speaking of winning, the Overfiend's climax.
Ooh, this is where it gets spicy.
ooh, I see.
Mark, can you read it like an erotic novel?
A neurotic.
Do you want neurotic? Okay, do you want a neurotic novel or an Orc voice?
No,
What do we
neither.
want here?
Neither. Don't do either of those.
As the war raged on, the Overfiend strategy continued to evolve. his focus shifted to a series of pivotal engagements designed to crush the Tyranid swarms and secure his dominance over the sector. The culmination of this phase of the war was massive confrontation that would become legendary in Orc lore. In this climactic battle, the Overfiend led his forces in a final all-out assault against the Tyranid hive fleets. The battle was a maelstrom of destruction, with the Overfiend himself engaging in the brutal direct confrontation with the Tyranid leaders. The violence and clash was unprecedented, with the Orcs' mighty form cleaving through the Tyranid ranks, a beacon of Orc fury amidst the chaos. However, the tides of battle was unforgiving, and the sheer scale of the conflict and the relentless nature of the Tyranid swarm took its toll. During the battle, the Overfiend sustained severe injuries, a blow that would not only mark a turning point in the war, but also leave him vulnerable to the tide of destruction that would follow.
Whenever I hear Overfiend, it almost sounds like a Tyranid title now that I think of it. Because even reading this, I always have to remember that that's whenever you say Overfiend, it's the Orcs, not the Tyranids. I don't know, it fits into the Tyranid naming conventions.
Yeah, like Overfiend,
anyway.
Swarm Lord, pretty similar.
Yeah, right? Which is also kind of cool because then they kind of mirror each other also as enemies, but yeah.
Well, it's also interesting, like they're both kind of like swarmy tactic people. Like they both are like, they don't necessarily always go for, they do have their elite units, but mostly they're about just
brutally slugging it out.
Exactly. Just volume of bodies is how they win their wars.
You need to get the Kriegers in there too.
That's right. The Kriegers need to get in there.
I picture that scene from World War Z where the zombies are like climbing up the wall of Jerusalem and it's just a stack of bodies. And you got that with Tyranids. On the top, you got a stack of body of boys. They're just ready to go. they're jumping like, off into the pile.
They become like a pyramid, just like.
Yeah, man. Yeah, the mass, just the sheer mass of bioforms would be just overwhelming. You wouldn't know what to do, man.
That'd be sweet to see it on the tabletop too. Just freaking every model you got. Just throw down a ton of Tyranids, a ton of Orcs, and just roll it out. Just dice flying everywhere.
That would be fun, yeah. Just like you have one character aside, and you just have like, this is my Overlord and or Overfiend, sorry, and
Swarmlord.
And the Swarm Lord, and you just duke it out as like a reenactment. That'd be fun.
All right, the Swarm Lord's consumption of Octarius. In the cold, unfathomable depths of the galaxy, the Tyranid hive fleets advanced with an unyielding purpose, driven by a hunger that transcended the mere consumption of worlds. Their perspective on the Octarius War was one of relentless predation, a grim and horrifying odyssey marked by the systemic annihilation of all life. The hive fleet's approach to Octarius was a testament to their insatiable appetite and the grim calculus of their existence. The arrival of the hive fleets. As the Octarius War began to unfold, the Tyranid hive fleets, vast, incomprehensible entities of bioengineered monstrosities, drew nearer to the sector. Their approach was marked by an eerie, predatory silence, a stark contrast to the clamor of war that defined the conflict between the Orcs and the Tyranids. For the Tyranids, the sector was not merely a battleground, it was a prime opportunity for the expansion of their hunger. Yeah, that silence is like that, silence in the warp, like everything, that calm before the storm. When the Tyranids attack, it's always like things are eerily quiet, and then all of a sudden, chaos. The first sign, the first signs of their arrival were ominous. Unnatural cosmic disturbances, the tearing of reality itself, signaled the arrival of the hive fleets. The sheer scale of these fleets was beyond comprehension, their presence a dark harbinger of the devastation that would soon follow. The Tyranids descended upon the sector with a singular, horrifying purpose, to consume all life and strip the sector of its resources. The Swarm's methodical advance. The Tyranids' approach to warfare was a cold, methodical process. Their strategy was not one of reckless abandon, but of calculated consumption. The Hive Fleet's advance was characterized by relentless, systematic assault designed to maximize their efficiency in devouring worlds. The Swarm moved in a coordinated fashion, each bioship and creature working in harmony to achieve the ultimate goal of total annihilation. The hive mind is a vast and unfathomable consciousness that directs the swarms with precision that belied their seemingly chaotic nature. The hive fleets targeted worlds with strategic importance, ensuring that their path of destruction was both effective and efficient. Their bioengineered organisms, from the monstrous carnifexes to the swarming termagants, were unleashed upon the targets with chilling efficiency. As the Tyranids advanced, the true horror of their consumption became apparent. Entire worlds were laid waste, their ecosystems ravaged, and their populations exterminated. The process of consumption was brutal and unrelenting. Planets were systematically stripped of all life and resources, reducing to barren husks devoid of any trace of their former vitality. For the inhabitants of the Octarius sector, the Tyranid invasion was a nightmare made real. The relentless advance of the swarm brought a new level of horror to the sector as entire civilizations were erased from existence. The Tyranids' voracious appetite knew no bounds, their bioengineered organisms consuming not only the flesh of their victims, but also the very essence of their worlds. The clash with the Orks. The Orks, led by the formidable Overfiend, added a new layer of complexity to the invasion. The Orks' relentless aggression provided a chaotic and brutal counterpoint to the Tyranids' methodical consumption. The battles between the two forces were marked by savage intensity, with Orks' sheer numbers and ferocity clashing violently with the Tyranids' adaptability and precision. The conflict between the Orks and the Tyranids was a brutal, cataclysmic clash of titans. The Tyranids, driven by their hunger, sought to devour the Ork forces just as they did with everything else. The Orks, for their part, were driven by their own unyielding warlust, fighting with a savage intensity that was both a challenge and an opportunity for the Tyranids.
Okay, I want to throw in one of our first main digressions. And it comes with the way the Tyranids kind of approach battle. It is very consistently, it's very consistent in how they do it. They're always like, okay, we're going to go here, we're going to fight. And sure, they have some personality in how they go about doing different strategies and how they defeat their enemies. But I wonder, do you guys think it would be interesting if they started giving the Hive Fleet, or the Hive Mind, more of a personality where it like kind of has emotions or feelings? I know they kind of touch on that a little bit, like they have a little bit of a vendetta against the Blood Angels, but like, do you think that would be more fun, or would that take away from the alienness of them if they had like started giving a personality to the Hive Mind? What do you guys think of that?
I'm not a fan of it. It feels too much like a YA novel. They start having feelings.
YA?
Young adult.
Okay.
Young adult fiction. CW.
Even I've read
don't
that.
understand me. No,
Yeah.
but like they do have some, but like they can just feel a little bit like robotic, almost like they don't have. Yeah, Jack's asking the questions that need to be asked. Has the Hive Mind ever been happy?
We're asking all the wrong questions here.
Have they ever been like, I feel that was like tasty meal, and I just feel that was.
I feel satisfied.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, but
going on to
even
get
then,
something else.
like the hunger is there. Like, yeah, it's not like they're resting after they eat a planet. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, that
like-
was good. They're not resting in happiness for sure.
Well, okay, then let's take it to, so for example, when Angron blows up that planet or explodes that device, and he feels that moment of like no pain as he's completely obliterated, and then immediately gets returned to the state of pain as he goes back to the warp. Would there be something like that for the Tyranids, or would that be something interesting for that to be included in the story, where they're like, oh yeah, like they're compelled, the Hive Mind is so compelled to do its mission of consuming that like it's suffering almost? I don't know, something like that.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I'm almost thinking like, so
Okay,
the
we-
Hive Mind.
Go ahead.
I definitely agree. I don't think it should have an emotional development, but if it does, it should find love.
Leaning
Alex-
right into that YA novel.
Alex, you're filthy. Get out of here.
He's gonna have a three-way love triangle with Orks and the Necron.
I mean, think about it. We're trying to sell plastic toys to younglings, so what better way to do it?
Busting the whole demographic.
I mean, there are young like children's novels in 40K too. So
yeah, they're missing the whole like teen young adult.
yeah,
fiction,
that's what we need, is the
love story.
the Hive Mind finds like a vampire blood angel.
Blood Angel. Oh no!
God
The Siege of
damn.
Ball.
This-
What's in that ball?
the third
You
one
guys
is
need to
actually
take
Twilight.
credit. Yeah, fuck
I
it,
didn't
no.
sign up for this Twilight Reject story.
Yeah. The next guy, Tree Fries, says, wouldn't the Hive Mind only feel hunger? There are no other emotions. It's just an endless hunger. So here's kind of my thought on this. Let's talk about the shadow and the warp for a hot second. So what this is, it's kind of hard to explain, but basically it is a blank wall between the warp and reality. So psychers, if they feel the shadow and the warp, they're no longer able to necessarily grab the psychic powers. So maybe that wall is like a mesh wall, so you can pull some powers through the wall. But the stronger that psychic shadow in the warp is, you're not getting any of that warp stuff. So now let's break down, what do we know about the warp? The warp is a reflection of our emotions. So, if Tyranids aren't even having emotions, in fact, they're cutting themselves off from the warp, maybe they have only just like negative emotion or that hunger emotion. Or, people, when they tap into it, they just hear the chittering sound in their mind, where I like that, where it's alien, it's that chittering. It's not anything that we can really even understand, maybe beyond hunger.
Yeah. No, I really like that, actually.
To put this in perspective, there was a short story of Trazyn and Orkin going at it, and Orkin unleashes a hive fleet remnant. He tried to possess, I think it was a hive tyrant or something like that. He can only last like a few seconds before blitzing out of there because he could not comprehend whatever the hell it was that was feeding the hive tyrant that information.
Yeah.
I'm okay with them being alien and maybe feeling things we don't understand. I think that would be just more interesting to explore as like, is there something more than just methodical going to eat things? Because it is a mind that's bigger than all of, like, it's, if all the insects on the planet basically were one brain, what would it think?
Yeah.
And that's basically what it is. And sure, it could be beyond us. It could be something hard to understand, but just only like being robotically going from place to place, I think is a little bit, it's a little bit less.
Well, let me ask you two questions,
idea.
James. Question one, do you like bugs?
No, I don't like bugs.
Okay.
Or shrimp.
So far, this is not looking good. Or shrimp. Question number two, do you have a favorite bug?
I feel like daddy long legs, because they're just kind of chilling all the time.
Okay. Okay, so, well, see, I think we went wrong when you weren't afraid of bugs. So you're just like, how do we make these things something I like? And it's just you're not tapped into the market of bug fetish.
I don't know. Jax had it right here. Tyranid X Dante. I think that's the book I'm looking for.
Yikes.
And
so we got YA novels, we got erotic fiction coming out.
That's right. It's all targeted to me.
No, boys, this is supposed to be Dad Hammer, wholesome, family-friendly Lorehammer. None of that smut.
Yeah, we're saving that for Mom Hammer. And that's just me. I'll be on that one.
I'll join.
I'll be your daddy.
So that was my depression.
Oh, that's a YouTube channel. All right, Gerald, how did I do in giving you some notes now to read with us?
Well, one, it would help if I unmuted my mic. So, okay. Main timeline. Pre-war background. M39 pre-conflict status.
Oh, hold on. Sorry. I don't think we actually read the last little bit here. The most crucial part, honestly, of the whole thing.
My digression.
The consumption of Octarius. Very...
Finish it.
The consumption of Octarius. As the war raged on, the Tyranids' efforts to consume the sector reached a horrifying climax. The Hive fleets pressed their assault with unrelenting ferocity, their advance marked by unending tide of bioengineered horrors. The final stages of the consumption were marked by a grim, methodical process of extermination as the Tyranids sought to complete their conquest of the sector. The consumption of Octarius was a testament to the Tyranids' horrifying efficiency. The sector was systematically reduced to a state of utter desolation. The once vibrant worlds now devoid of life and resources. The process of consumption was both brutal and displayed the Tyranids' insatiable hunger and a chilling reminder of their dominance over the galaxy. So, we have this whole big war. And ultimately, like I was saying at the beginning, we go back and forth, and they win on this planet. Now the Orks win on this planet. Now we get corn that appears, which we will talk about. And now they win on this planet, and we get a bunch of these things. But ultimately, what happens is, Kryptman does this gambit, and it fails horribly. And the outcome is the Ork Empire is essentially shattered. The Overfiend's killed. Now there are a bunch of new warlords that are now popping up, and that's its own problem in and of itself, where, that power vacuum that is now created, who's going to be the new war boss. They're all going to fight each other and now create a better war boss than the last one. But ultimately, most of the sector was consumed by the Tyranids. Planets that haven't been consumed are still in this constant state of Orc versus Tyranid battle. And the Imperium has basically evacuated the system to its fate at this point, you know?
It's wild. The Tyranids just destroying things at such a high rate.
Mm-hmm. It's super cool, the different ways that they do it. We have a main timeline that Gerald can read now, finally, just to kind of wrap up kind of, you know, the broad outline of what kind of the overall thing is. So take it away.
All right. Main timeline. Pre-war background. M39, pre-conflict status. The Octarius sector, located in the Segmentum Ultima, is a chaotic and hostile region teeming with Orc warbands and bordering the Tyranid High Fleet's territory. The Orcs are already entrenched in the sector, while the Tyranids are preparing for their invasion. Early stages of the war. M39, initial contact around 899 M39. High Fleet Behemoth, one of the early Tyranid High Fleets, began to make contact with the Orc-held worlds of the Octarius sector. The initial clashes are relatively minor, but signify the beginning of the Tyranid invasion. M39, Inquisitor Kryptman's Gambit, circa 900 M39. Inquisitor Kryptman initiates a strategic gambit to exploit the conflict between the Orcs and the Tyranids. He plans to use the Orcs as a buffer to slow the Tyranid advance and protect more crucial Imperial worlds. The Swarm Lord in the early war. The Swarm Lord's arrival, 901 M39. The Swarm Lord, a formidable Tyranid leader, arrives in the Octarius sector. Its presence marks a significant escalation in the conflict as the Swarm Lord begins to lead the Tyranid forces more aggressively. Major Orc engagements, 902 M39. The Orcs, led by various war bosses and their numerous war bands, engage the Tyranid forces in several large battles. Despite their initial success, the Orcs struggle against the Tyranid swarm's sheer numbers and adaptability. Turning points in intensification. The Octarius War begins in earnest, 903 M39. The war intensifies as both sides commit more resources to the conflict. The Orcs and Tyranids engage in several high-casualty battles, with the Tyranids beginning to overwhelm the Orc positions. Rise of the Overfiend of Octarius, 904 M39. The Orcs unite under a powerful new war boss known as the Overfiend of Octarius. This leader consolidates Orc forces and begins to push back against the Tyranid invasion. The Overfiend's offensive, 905 M39. The Overfiend launches a series of offensives against the Tyranid forces, leading to a temporary stabilization of the front lines. The Orcs gain ground and inflict significant losses in the Tyranid swarm. Climax and conclusion. M39, 906 M39. The Swarm Lord, injured but still formidable, leads a massive counteroffensive against the Orcs. The Tyranids push forward, regaining lost ground and causing severe casualties among the Orc ranks. The Battle of Octarius, 907 M39. The decisive battle of the Octarius War occurs. The Overfiend of Octarius is critically injured in a climactic engagement, leading to a temporary retreat of Orc forces and a shift in the war's dynamics. Aftermath, 908 M39. The war continues to simmer, with neither side achieving a definite victory. The Octarius sector remains a hotbed of conflict, with sporadic engagements between the Orcs and Tyranids continuing for years to come. Long-term impact. Ongoing conflict. The Octarius War remains unresolved, with the sector remaining a dangerous and volatile area. The conflict between the Orcs and Tyranids continues, with both sides suffering heavy losses and occasionally achieving temporary victories.
It's kind of crazy that this war, you know, this sector-wide war only really lasts 100 years. It's still ongoing, but it's pretty quick, really. But also at the same time, it's long. Like Inquisitor Kryptman was here this whole time messing around. That guy's getting old.
Yeah. Lots of high-ranking Imperials, too, can do, like, rejuvenation treatments and stuff and keep themselves around a lot longer. So, yeah, like, he's
I mean,
It
how
can be there
old
for a
is old? Because you get some High Lords of Terror who are in like their 400s or 500s. So
Yeah.
Yeah, but how competent are they? I feel like politicians, when they get to a certain age, you know.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, name
well-
one. Name one old politician that's incompetent. I bet you can't.
I'm going to mute my mic.
No,
Yeah.
it is like an interesting thing. Like, it is basically a Tyranid win, but they just can't finalize it. Is basically what it seems
Yeah.
like.
Well, it's just that orc problem. It's like, yeah, okay, you've killed all the orcs, and then they have the little spore babies, and now you're fighting a whole new war again, over and over.
Yeah, I think like the biggest lesson of all of this is just the relentless. Like if it was anyone other than Orks and Tyranids, they'd just be so tired of just constantly freaking fighting.
What are you talking about? Mankind's been doing it for 40,000 years. For
They love
10,000
it.
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
Join the guard now.
You're in the guard, son.
All right, who wants to? Yeah, like it's just let's dive into some more specifics. I got some notable battles here. I picked out a couple that I thought were particularly interesting. Who wants to start?
Yeah, I'll take one here. So the Octarius War was defined by several key battles and significant events, each contributing to the grim and chaotic nature of the conflict. Here's a closer look at some of those most notable engagements and operations. So the Carpathian Caverns raid, which interestingly is a mountain range in Hungary. In a desperate bid to combat the growing Tyranid threat, Inquisitor Kryptman led a high-risk operation involving Deathwatch kill teams into the dark and treacherous caverns of Carpathia. The objective was to capture a brood of live gene steers and use them as part of a desperate gambit against the Tyranid hive fleet. The capture of these gene stealers was crucial for Kryptman's strategy to divert Leviathan's path. By introducing these bioforms into the Perdition's Flame, a space hulk, and then altering its trajectory, Kryptman aimed to mislead the Tyranids and gain a strategic advantage in the war. The Deathwatch, equipped with specialized weaponry for combating Xenos threats, including the potent frag cannon and Infernus heavy bolter, the Deathwatch kill teams used precision strikes and stealth tactics to navigate the hazardous terrain of the Carpathian Caverns. The Gene Stealers, known for their stealth and lethal close combat abilities, the Gene Stealers posed a significant threat, requiring Deathwatch to employ a combination of firepower and tactical acumen to contain and capture them. What made this different from any of the other operations was it was marked by its high-risk nature and the strategic use of captured Gene Stealers, which is highly risky. Of all the Tyranid things to capture, that is up there on the list of difficult ones. The successful capture of the brood, despite heavy casualties, demonstrated the lengths to which Kryptman was willing to go to achieve his objectives and the dire nature of the war against the Tyranids.
Yeah,
And just
it's cool.
Sorry, just a little background context for people who aren't familiar with how Tyranids operate is that capture of Gene Stealers. Gene Stealers often infiltrate ahead of the Hive Fleet, and they act as like a beacon to attract the Hive Fleet. So. Just a little context.
Yeah, like the Gene Stealers will go infiltrate the population, start little cults everywhere, and then when it reaches that peak rebellion time, they send out that signal.
Yeah.
Kind of does a lot of destabilization too, just to make the invasion just a little bit easier.
Yeah, just a little bit. As if the orcs weren't infighting enough. Just make it that much more.
Absolutely.
But that's really like how Kryptman did it. Like, how do you redirect a hive fleet? Like, you have to kind of use it against itself and kind of tap into this hive mind and use that against itself, as the Imperium often does, whether it's killing the hive mind or eliminating it, scattering the swarm, or like tricking it, redirecting it,
It does show, like, surprisingly how much the Imperium doesn't understand Tyranid operations. Like, they do have kind of like some set things that this is how they work, and it is able to manipulate it.
Yeah.
Well, I think it goes back to like a point that y'all made earlier, is just like not every Imperial citizen is going to know about it, and two, because of how they adapt, it's like once you figure out one thing about how they work, all of a sudden, boom, they've evolved and now they're adapted to do something different. So now you got to learn the process all over again.
Okay, Gerald, here's where we're going to get into some controversy, because how often do they evolve? Because there's some forms that have existed basically since they found them, and they modify on some levels, but they do have like a fairly uniform way of doing stuff now at this point, right? Like they've been using termagants for how many hundreds of years since they first Tyrannic War. So yeah, you're right. They do adapt a lot, but like, is the strategy they're using ultimately going to change? They're still going to use gene stealers. They're still going to omniposit inside of people, and they're still gonna chase down those gene stealers when they're going somewhere, right? And they're still going to respond to that signal. So I don't know. Are they the Imperium can learn and have strategies specifically for Tyranids that are pretty stable?
Well, you make a fair point. I was basically going off of the meme of how Tyranids just evolve.
Gerald, you're not supposed to give me any credit. You're supposed to say how wrong I am, and then we argue. That's the format of this podcast.
Fine, I will found James Compliments at hotmail.com. Just to spite you.
James Compliments, I dare you.
I kind of look at it like this. Like, the Tyranids, I don't think this is their first galaxy. You know, this is not their first time. They've already dialed in their bioforms a lot. So now at this point, it requires more minor tweaking. So like a simple one in my mind would be like the hive mind learns about plysteel and adamantium. And it learns that, oh, this acid is better against plysteel, but it's useless against adamantium. So to me, it's like these small little like tweaks, tricks like that, where you're not making a whole new life form or spawning new biome. Or it's these small tweaks like that. Maybe your scything talon is serrated instead of like a clean edge, and that really helps against this enemy.
I think that makes sense, because ultimately the Tyranids win a good chunk of the time whenever they like actually engage. It seems like they are going to win. You might kill a little splinter fleet here and there, but like when a hive fleet decides it's going somewhere, it's going to win, just like it did here in Octarius.
Yeah, and even to that, like to us, like repelling Tyranid forces or killing billions of Tyranids, you kind of look at that as like, okay, that's kind of a victory. But to the overall scale of the hive fleet, that's nothing. Like, you've really done nothing. And especially with the number of hive fleets coming in, like people saying like these are just tendrils of something even bigger, then like you, again, even small victories for the Imperium are really just a minor inconvenience.
But they're still Imperial victories.
That's right.
A win is a win.
Some of you may die, but as a sacrifice I am willing to make.
Pyrrhic victory is my favorite kind.
All right, let's bring in another notable battle and another notable hero, Ghazkul's Arrival. In 694-999 M41, the infamous Orc warlord Ghazkul Meg Uruk Thraka arrived in the Octarius sector, having grown bored of the Third War for Armageddon. Ghazkul proclaimed a new Great War, targeting the Octarius sector for his next grand campaign. Ghazkul's arrival was a game changer for the Orcs in the sector. His leadership reinvigorated the Greenskins and shifted the momentum of the war. By rallying the Orc forces and engaging in high-profile battles, he established dominance and expanded Orc influence in the region. Under Ghazkul's leadership, the Orcs employed their characteristic aggressive tactics, including massed infantry assaults and the deployment of power war machines like Stompas and battle wagons. Ghazkul himself is known for his combat prowess and the use of the Warp Storm custom Mega Blasta. The battles involving Ghazkul were marked by intense combat and strategic maneuvers as he engaged with both Tyranid and Imperial forces. His ability to rally the Orcs and lead them in coordinated assaults made him a formidable force. Ghazkul's arrival added a new level of strategic depth to the conflict. His leadership not only boosted the Orc forces, but also introduced a new phase of the war that significantly impacted the war's dynamics. His engagement with the mighty Malloc, subsequent rallying of Orcs, showcased his ability to inspire and lead his forces effectively.
Yeah, like Ghazkul kind of brought a religious fervor, so to speak, to the Orcs, because he's the prophet of the Wog, and he kind of shows up mid-hunt of doing whatever he else is up to and just rallies everyone and kind of helps win this portion of the war. He's in the middle portion of the war.
He turns the tide.
Yeah, and he kind of rallies them. Yeah. unfortunately, since it's Gazkul and he's got bigger, better things to do, he actually leaves the system to go hunt Helbrich and who's the guardsman
Things fall
guy?
apart.
Yeah, who's that guardsman with the claw? Yark,
Yeah.
Commissar Yark. So yeah, and then so he comes in, you know, rallies everyone, and then kind of leaves, and then the Octarius Orc is like, okay, and then
Thanks.
thanks. But I kind of like it. Like, to me, that's Orc. It's like, even when you're working together, like, you're not really working together.
Yeah.
Gazkul couldn't give two fucks about Overfiend and his objectives. You know, he was just here for romping good time.
Yeah. And then when the good time's done, he's like, okay, I'm bored. I got to go back.
Because the boys need to
Yeah.
that was a good crumpin'.
Exactly. The next battle I decided to highlight was the Skull Hunt and Dama. The World Eaters warband, known as the Skull Hunt of Vodha, Blood Price, invaded the Octarius system, drawn by the ongoing violence between the Orks and the Tyranids. This warband, dedicated to Khorne, sought to add to their collection of skulls and gain favor with the Dark God.
Yeah, like that does like scream. There
Khorne.
should be a couple things that should be showing up. I would expect. What is that? Necron flayers. What are those called?
Poof. Flayed ones. Yeah.
Blade ones. Yeah, that's the one. I'd expect them to be showing up with how much violence is going on, and Khorne definitely seems like he should be showing up here.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
At the end of the episode, I did write down like a order of battle, and it is crazy what's all here. There's night houses that have hundreds of knights engaged in this war. Like, it's massive.
Yeah.
There's all types.
Because it's so focused on Tyranids and Orcs, you kind of forget that the Imperium has a huge presence as well. And there are tons of Imperial units that are engaged in this bloodfest.
Yeah.
And even people living there. Like, there are hive cities in this sector. Just getting wrecked.
Just another day in the Imperium. Have another ration of corpse starch, because that was the guy that just died last week. Food's up. So the importance of the arrival of the Skull Hunt Warband was subsequent battles that had a profound impact on the sector. The World Eaters' brutal and bloody tactics escalated the conflict to new levels of violence, affecting both the Orcs and the Tyranids. Vodha, Blood Price's ascent to demonhood and his leadership of the larger warband further intensified the carnage. Tactics and weapons. The World Eaters. The Skull Hunt Warband, led by Vodha, Blood Price, utilized Khorne's favorite tactics of close quarters combat and relentless slaughter. They employed chainswords, power axes, and other brutal weapons in their assaults. The warband also included Chaos Cultists, Beastmen, and the Dark Mechanicum forces, adding to a scale of violence. The Orks and the Tyranids, during the conflict on the Maw, saw hordes of Tyranids and Greenskins clashing in colossal battles. The World Eaters' presence introduced a new dimension of chaos and brutality, further escalating the violence. What made this different? The Skull Hunt and the Maw were characterized by their extreme savagery and the addition of chaos forces into the conflict. Vodha Blood Price's rise to demonhood and the sheer scale of the slaughter provide a unique and grim dimension to the war. The combination of Orcs, Tyranids, Chaos forces created a particularly brutal and chaotic environment, reflecting the relentless nature of the Octarius War. Like, just imagine you're having the baddest day of your week, of your life, and then some Yahoo in an 8-pointed crown helmet comes in and just makes your week a whole lot worse for no reason. That's kind of what happens. They just come in, they're like, this is a huge battle. We have no real goals. We're not trying to save any relics. We're not here to conquer a planet.
We're just here to kill.
Just getting skulls, Yeah,
I for the blood god.
I do love that, like, World Eaters, that is just their MO, is just showing up to just wreck stuff. Why are you here? Just to kill stuff. And it makes sense that to be drawn by, like, how big this war is becoming, right? Like I said, there's certain things that are drawn to scale of conflict. Flayed Ones being one, and the World Eaters being another one, or just any Khorne followers would be drawn to it. So, and I like the added detail that you added with, like, the different machines, because sometimes it can seem like when you're playing it on the table, you like, oh, I have this squad of World Eaters, but they're joined with, like, armies themselves of chaos worshippers and different demon engines that are being provided by them. It's not just like a squad of guys going around. They're bringing some real firepower too.
Yeah.
Yeah, even the fact that he, Mark, say the name again. I just like the way you say it.
Vodha.
Vodha's ascension to demonhood is interesting too.
He obviously did a good job.
Exactly. Like there was enough slaughter there to actually have him ascend.
I mean, that's like peak opportunism right there.
Yeah.
He probably let all his boys die too, just so he could do it, because he doesn't care about anybody.
That's fine. Who wants next?
I guess I can go. Let's see. This Pam Callus, is that how that is?
Painkillers.
I was gonna say, that's what I was just about to say. the painkillers. Let's see here. Overview. The Painkillers subsector was a significant theater of war during the Octarius conflict, with numerous skirmishes and battles occurring across its various worlds. The subsector's strategic importance made it a focal point for both Orks and Tyranid forces. The battles in the Painkillers subsector played a crucial role in shaping the overall outcome of the war. Control of the subsector was essential for maintaining supply lines and strategic positioning, making it a key area of contention. Orks. The Orks employed their usual tactics of overwhelming force and brutal aggression. They used large-scale assaults and coordinated attacks to seize control of key positions. Tyranids. The Tyranids used its biological adaptability and swarm tactics to challenge the Orks. They deployed a large range of bioengineered organisms to achieve their goals. And what made it different was the Painkillers subsector was marked by a series of smaller, intense skirmishes rather than a single decisive battle. The continuous fighting and shifting control of the sector made it a dynamic... You're blocking my view.
I'm sorry.
You're blocking my view, thank you. Made a dynamic and fluid front in the war.
That was a little sabotage from James, the sniffer of Slanesh there.
Forget what I said about James compliments. I'm going full on James complaints now.
That's right. That's what I expect.
Yeah, this one was interesting to me when I was reading about it in the book, because there's like a bunch of small wars all over the place. But when we're talking about small wars that involve Tyranid hierophants and biotitans, like it's just another scale of this war. Like we're talking Gorgants and Gargants like clashing with hierophants, like such cool imagery of these monstrosities that like just tower above buildings, but just minor skirmishes. The next one we have is the Valorian Expedition. The Valorian Expedition was a significant Imperial response to the growing Tyranid threat in the sector. Led by high-ranking Imperial commanders, the expedition aimed to counter the Tyranid invasion and stabilize the region. Importance: the expedition represented a major effort by the Imperium to regain control and push back against the Tyranid forces. It was a critical component of the broader strategy to contain and mitigate the impact of the Tyranid invasions. Tactics and weapons. Imperial forces. The Valorian expedition employed a combination of defensive fortifications, artillery bombardments, and counter-assaults to combat the Tyranids. The use of specialized anti-Tyranid weaponry and coordinated strategies was key to their approach. What made this one different? The Valorian expedition was notable for its strategic emphasis on countering the Tyranid threat. The efforts of the Imperium to reclaim lost grounds and stabilize the region highlighted the ongoing struggle to manage the impact of the Tyranid invasion and maintain a foothold in its sector. Like, this is basically what the Imperium was up to this whole time while the Orks are fighting. They're like, we got to plan it here. We got to try to hold this one, like, at the very least.
Yeah, it could also be like a strike of opportunism where you're like, okay, I think the Orks have done enough damage. We'll maybe like hit them in the side or hit them in the back and try and like deal with the Tyranids that way while the Orks are taking the brunt of the Tyranid invasion. Or alternatively, as the Imperium is known, maybe the commanders just didn't communicate with each other. Kryptman didn't say anything, and then the Imperium general is like, oh, this huge war is going on. We got to get involved. We got to save the Octarius sector.
Yeah.
And they send their men into the meat grinder.
How dare you speak such heresy? They are all competent leaders.
It's a possibility. It's always a possibility.
Alex says, make the skies black with Haradrons, the giant flying Tyranid dragon things that just spawn more.
Yeah. Think of gargoyles and then like the number of gargoyles and then just make them scale up to Haradrons.
Who's fucking hyped for Space Marine 2, man? Seeing like the swarms of flying gargoyles in the background of that game, yikes.
Just the visuals are almost worth just getting it alone.
Yeah, man.
All right. As any good GW war, we have to include all the races in the conflict. Next up, we have Samhain raids. The Samhain craft world and Eldar faction conducted a series of raids during the Octarius War. These raids were aimed at exploiting the chaos and disruption caused by the ongoing conflict between the Orks and Tyranids. The Eldar raids were significant because they represented an opportunistic response to the sector's instability. By striking amidst the chaos, the Eldar sought to gain strategic advantages and recover important artifacts. The Samhain used their advanced technology and speed to conduct hit-and-run raids. Their tactics involved rapid deployment, precise strikes, and swift withdrawals to avoid prolonged engagements. Both Xenos factions, the Orks and the Tyranids, were caught off guard by the Eldars' agility and advanced weaponry, leading to the significant disruptions of their operations. The raids were distinct for their tactical finesse and the Eldars' ability to capitalize on existing conflict. The raids showcase the Eldars' expertise in exploiting chaos and their strategic prowess in achieving their objectives amidst the larger war. So yeah, in the middle of everything else going on, they're just like needling, getting in there and just needling and screwing with plans or like getting artifacts, like getting in and out.
I feel like that's always what the Eldar are doing. They're just kind of everywhere, just kind of doing whatever Eldar do. They've got plans.
Messing with your stuff.
Yeah, that's what they do.
It was kind of cool. Like there were some Dark Eldar involved in this, and like Eldar pirates and stuff, and yeah, just some cool imagery of like the fleets battling each other, like the almost organic Wraithbone versus the organic Hive fleets and stuff. It's kind of very, yeah, it's quite the clash of imagery of bone.
What do you make of the idea that the Eldar were able to take the Tyranids off guard?
Yeah, like they could have ambushed out of the webway. Like there's no way to know that would happen.
I guess because like even the Tyranids don't have a way of like the webway is such a mysterious thing that like basically it's only the Eldar who know how to do it, and it took so much effort of the Emperor trying to make it happen that maybe this is just something that the Tyranids can't wrap their mind around.
Yeah, when we did episode 101 and we did at the end, we did Tales of the Warp, but we talked about the origins of the Tyranids and how maybe they were created by the old ones and all that kind of stuff. And the webway would be the perfect hiding place from the Tyranids, was kind of the key piece of that puzzle, where you can do whatever you want in the webway and you're safe from these Nids invasions, and then you can come out 1,000 years later and do your thing.
Can Tyranids get into the webway?
I would imagine, man. Like, if you can have demons in there, like, why not?
Yeah. In which case, like, that's a whole plot on its own. Like, if they get in,
if they get in the webway, yeah, that'd be wild.
Yeah.
And then you could like collapse parts of the webway, or you could systematically let them in, kill a bunch, close the gate, handle what's in the webway, open it up, let more in, kill them. I don't know.
Just like.
Yeah.
The Inquisition has their Kryptman. Kamara has Asdrubal Vect. So
what would be the effect of cutting off something in the webway? Would they like get in there and would they be cut off from the hive mind?
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting question.
So
I would imagine it would, because like it is technically not on our plane of existence. Like it is a parallel dimension or whatever. So I doubt.
So if you like open the door, some go in, would they just become completely feral, or like because that's how they become when they're cut off from the hive mind? But that's in a totally that's when they're still in our reality. So who knows would they just freak out because they have no connection to the hive mind?
Yeah, no, they would go back to like their base instincts, but yeah, like they would definitely have to leave that gate open and have like a synapses pathway all the way from the hive mind through to whatever they're doing in the webway. Whoa.
Interesting.
Yeah.
crazier ways to combat the Tyranids. We should open all the doors of the webway and let them.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's
Yeah,
a new
just
gambit. It's a new
travel.
gambit.
Can we call that one Christian's Gambit?
Oh,
Christian's
no.
Gambit.
Okay,
I
so we
like
got
it.
Christian's
Inquisitor,
Gambit.
naughty Christian.
So Christian's Gambit of open all the webway doors. Mark's Gambit of put one blank in every square meter of the galaxy.
Wait, hold
Yeah,
on a
yeah.
second. Hold on a second. There are demons in the Emperor's version of the webway, right?
Yeah.
So what if you let the Tyranids into that webway and then
Let
they
the
just
demons and the
feed each
Tyranids fight each other.
So instead of the Octarius War, you have the Emperor's Webway Terra War.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
already demons in there. It can't get worse.
The deep
It got
war in
worse.
the webway. Got much worse.
It always can get
All right. Enough. Who's letting orcs in here now? Enough.
Jax has a question.
We have a limit.
What do you think that the so he says you know how in Halo 3 the Flood teams up with humans basically to stop the flood? Would there be an equivalency? I'm pretty that happens all the time where things team up to fight stuff.
But can it be done with Tyranids?
Well, on like as in they team up with Tyranids? I
Yeah,
don't
like
think so.
humans and Tyranids. He's
No.
saying like the
Oh,
flood
I
and
thought-
humans team up against the Covenant, against the
Yeah.
prophets.
Oh, I thought you were saying it was like the Covenant teaming up against the
No.
Flood.
Did you even play Halo 3?
I did play it. They don't team up with the Flood.
Yeah, they do.
I don't.
They team up with the Flood against the Covenant. Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't know anything then.
Can the Tyranids
Games
team up?
complaints, minimum 1,500 words.
It's-
Oh, I'm typing it up right now.
Yeah, I see it kind of playing out a little different. Like,
How
I
would
think
you
it would
even talk
depend
to
on
the
what the-
Tyranids?
I think it would depend on
Yeah,
what the
like-
bigger threat would be. What would it take to actually have that scenario?
I can't think of it. I don't think there is anything that would make the
Yeah.
Tyranids balk, first of all. And secondly, how would you even talk to them to team up? And thirdly, what would
Yeah.
be anything that they'd care about you? They just eat you and then use your biomass.
To fight whatever
Okay,
they
here's
have
a
to fight.
question. Since they're obviously linked with gene stealers, would that count?
indirectly, I suppose, but even that, like, they all get consumed as well, so it's
Yeah.
not like they're really
for the
long-term
com-
alliance, it's
Yeah, they just go back into hiding, waiting for.
I don't
To be-
see a scenario where they would do it, but to be fair, I do think to communicate, they could use some system like the Gene Stealer cults to communicate.
and-
But regardless, I don't think
I
there
don't
would
think
never
they
be a
ever would.
reason to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to be fair to Jackson's question too, like as soon as you take care of the Covenant, the Flood immediately turn on you anyway. So that's probably what Tyranids would do anyways.
yeah.
On that note, though, you could have like minor scenarios where like maybe a Gene Stealer cult might team up with another faction to fight a third faction because that third faction is an imminent risk to destroying the cult, which therefore would remove their beacon from summoning the rest of the Hive Fleet. So you could do something small like that, but I don't see like a full-on alliance with like the Hive Mind.
Yeah, it's too alien to me, and it just would want nothing to do with you beyond eating you,
And I think it would be like, oh, there's a bigger threat to me. I'll eat you, and then I'll
Then
have
I'll
more
fight.
biomass.
Yeah, then that's just more
Yeah.
fuel to fight the bigger threat.
because I'm better than you anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Either
Yeah.
way, I win.
Yeah.
Because like I could, the Necrons sometimes team up with people, but like they can't just absorb you the way the Tyranids can.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, not to mention when they absorb you, they've absorbed all your combat prowess, your tactic, like everything about you just becomes more genetic fodder for them to play around with. So they take your very essence.
Yeah. Yeah.
cool.
So yeah, those
let's
are a
jump-
couple of the kind of wars that we
Yeah.
got to. There's kind of two main things that I really kind of got my mind racing that I picked out when reading all this. The interactions of psychic warfare in the Octarius sector, like we'll get into that. And the other crazy thing that happens, and we'll get into, is just gene steal infiltration, specifically with orcs. So yeah, we'll dive into these two key kind of things that a lot of war zones don't have it amped up to this level, or yeah.
Yeah, cool. So psychic warfare in the Octarius sector. The Octarius War is not just a physical confrontation between the Orcs and the Tyranids, but also a battleground for psychic warfare, as like both of these are highly psychic. creatures, where raw power of the warp and the hive mind clash in devastating and spectacular ways. So both factions wield their own forms of psychic might, leading to some of the most dramatic and intense confrontations of the war. So orc weird boys are channeling the Wa. Orcs, being a naturally psychic race, draw immense power from their collective belief in the Wa energy. The psychic force grows stronger as more orcs gather and fight, creating a feedback loop that amplifies their abilities. Weird boys, the orc psychers, act as conduits for this energy, channeling it into devastating psychic attacks. The weird boys' psychic power is wild and unpredictable, often as dangerous to their allies as to their enemies, which is the most orky thing possible, of course. Zog Scrag's fury, a particularly infamous weird boy named Zog Scrag, becomes a full-on legend during the Octarius War. His psychic blasts are so powerful that they can vaporize entire swarms of Tyranid gaunts in seconds. However, the immense Wa energy he channels causes his head to explode spectacularly during a battle, killing hundreds of nearby orcs, but also taking out a key Tyranid synapse creature.
If it works, it works.
I mean, like, that just seems like the key.
Can't
the key
argue
thing.
with results.
Kill the synapse creature, and then you're just killing up like
The Octarius War summarized.
Yeah.
If it works, it works.
And when it doesn't work, oh boy, does it not work.
There's the episode, everybody.
Yeah. Psychic Wa storms. The orcs, when whipped into a frenzy by their war bosses and weird boys, generate massive psychic storms. These storms can warp reality, creating swirling vortexes of raw psychic energy that tear apart Tyranid bioforms and disrupt the hive mind's control over its swarms. These storms, however, are highly unstable and can turn on the orcs themselves, causing massive casualties, which, of course, they don't care about.
That's something that's so crazy that I never really thought about before. Is just like, you know, we know warp storms happen. We know the Eye of Terror was created when Slaanesh did its thing. You know, the Eldar created Slaanesh. But, like, thinking about orcs generating warp storms around the planet and the effects of that, now you're trapped on a planet with warp storms around you with this mob of wild orcs. Like, it's just another element of this orc power and how much their WOG really kind of just is so crucial to everything that they kind of can do.
If they open a warp storm, is there possibility of like demons pouring out of that then?
I would imagine, yeah. But I would imagine most of it, since it's like orc generated, it's more just like the WOG energy is pouring out. Like untapped WOG energy is just...
Yeah, think of it as like a nuclear blast. Just like raw power energy.
Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, there's no way demons aren't sneaking in every now and again through these storms and stuff. So it's just this new element I never thought about. Every time you have a big orc WOG, like what are they doing to the warp right now and the currents in the ocean and all that?
Just creating storms.
Yeah, I guess it have to be a particularly strong amount of war though, because like this is a particularly fierce set of conflicts, so it'd have to be a fairly dramatic amount of orcs doing something. But like then again, it almost is a hindrance to them as well, because like you're blowing up your own guys, you're taking out. It's like a problem that solves itself. So let's jump into some Tyranid psychers here. The will of the hive mind. So the Tyranids are guided by the hive mind, obviously, a vast psychic entity that controls its swarms with perfect synchronicity. The psychic power of the Tyranids is manifested through various synapse creatures and specialized psychers like zoanthropes and Swarmlord. These entities channel the will of the hive mind into powerful psychic abilities that can shatter minds and obliterate foes. See our Tyranid episode if you have any, if you want to dive into that.
If you want to know the origin of James' complaints,
yeah,
honestly, man, I've never got so much hate mail from something so inoffensive in my life. Talking shit about mantis shrimp and my inbox gets flooded. Like, it was crazy.
I know how to whip up the fury. See how fast I got to like completely switch on me.
Gotcha, bitch.
The Swarmlord's psychic dominance. The Swarmlord is a pinnacle of Tyranid evolution, and it possesses immense psychic power. It uses this power to dominate the battlefield telepathically, coordinating the movements of the Tyranid swarms with surgical precision. So it can do psychic interaction and hive mind interaction. It seems to have like both of those going simultaneously. And it unleashes devastating psychic attacks at the same time. So telekinetic blasts and crushing orc war machines or psychic screams that cause orcs to drop dead in agony. So it can use both its hive mind and psychic abilities to kind of double unleash its abilities there.
Yeah.
Zoanthrope strikes. So Zoanthropes, floating Tyranid psychers with massive brain structures, bombard orc positions with psychic lightning. These creatures focus their psychic energy into concentrated beams that can punch through the thickest armor and reduce orcs to ash. During the Battle of Octaria, a group of Zoanthropes combines their powers to create a massive psychic shockwave, leaving leveling an entire orc fortress. And this lore, obviously, all this war was done before some of the new Leviathan stuff that came out. So like there isn't the new what is it?
Yeah, I forget
Swarm
what they're
Tyrant?
called.
Something Tyrant.
Hmm.
It doesn't
What
matter.
is that?
The new psychic stuff that came out in Leviathan. So those
the
hadn't
Norn-
evolved yet.
Yeah,
Norn
the Norn
emissary,
Green.
was it?
That's the
Yeah,
emissaries
Norn
are also
Emissary.
there, but
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of new psychic stuff that came out in the new Leviathan lore. So that obviously wasn't.
Yeah, I
here
guess
at
they
this
have like
time.
even psychic gaunts and stuff, eh?
Yeah.
Like they got neuro gaunts or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, so like obviously everything I said about them not evolving is completely a lie, and is plainly obviously so.
Here's your James complaints moment.
There you go. I'm just giving them fodder, okay? People like to interact. It's participatory.
Such a very
Masturbatory.
Drukari thing of you.
Yeah. So I'll just jump into the epic psychic duels. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Octarius War is the psychic duels between Orc Weird Boys and Tyranid Psychers. These duels are battles of pure will and power, where the very fabric of reality is contested. So the dueling of Gorgog and the Swarm Lord is one legendary encounter. The Orc Weird Boy Gorgog the Mad, in fact, faces off against the Swarm Lord. The air crackles with psychic energy as Gorgog channels the Wa into a colossal green lightning bolt, while the Swarm Lord counters with a psychic shield. The clash of energies creates a blinding explosion visible from miles away. Though Gorgog ultimately succumbs to the Swarm Lord's superior psychic prowess, his sacrifice allows the Overfiend's forces to regroup and launch a counterattack. Weird Boy Mob versus a brood of Zoanthropes. In another epic battle, a mob of Weird Boys bands together to take on a brood of Zoanthropes. The combined Y energy of the Weird Boys manifests as a giant psychic effigy of Gork, or possibly Mork, the Orc gods. The psychic effigy rampages through the Tyranid ranks, smashing the Zoanthropes left and right. The Zoanthropes respond with a coordinated psychic barrage, causing the effigy to dissipate in a burst of green energy, but not before causing significant damage to the Tyranid lines. So yeah, that's like,
Yeah,
I mean,
just
they're battling in these weird ways, like that are not necessarily common in other battlefields. Just lots of psychic battles because they're both supercharged in their own versions of it. Because like obviously the Tyranids is the shadow in the war, but they still have psychic ability, and then the Weird Boys doing channeling the warp as they do.
Yeah. It's an interesting thought how the shadow and the warp would affect this. Like the orcs, it almost makes them better, this shadow and the warp, where it makes everything amped up, where, yeah, that weird boy is going to die because his head's going to explode. But when he does, it's going to be a bigger explosion because everything's just that much more. And the shadow and warp kind of, yeah, how do we think that kind of interacts with it all?
Well, it's weird to me. I would have thought that the shadow and the warp would dampen
Yeah,
the orcs.
that's typically it.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that's working. Maybe it's just the scale of the conflict is overpowering the shadow of the warp.
Yeah, or maybe because also the shadow and the warp prevents like demonic incursions for the most part. So maybe it acts as like a cutoff to like the worst. And when I say worst, like yeah, an orc's head could still explode or could create a warp blast, but would not turn it into like a warp tear that would allow demons to pour through.
Oh, so it's stabilizing force.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like
so
when
they
it
can go harder.
Exactly. Like when it
Yeah,
meets like a
interesting.
stabilizing counterbalance, that it actually, it makes them better at it. It makes them, their powers more able to be controlled rather than the chaotic nature of the warp coming through in full force is kind of how I'm mentally picturing it.
Yeah. Yeah, like it. just the amount of energy in these battles that are just getting unleashed across the battlefield. You know, you see the flashes from miles away. I think that was one of the coolest parts for sure about this Octarius War and reading through it all. Like, just, you know, what would 40K be without the warp, you know? And this is just dials it up in so many unique ways, and there's so many unique ways that they deal with the warp. It's not just, you know, they both operate with the warp very differently. They both utilize it differently. They both harness it. Like, yeah. So it's just such a cool way that every race has their own way. Special little guys.
They're just little guys.
So yeah, when it comes down to it, the impact on the war is of the psychic element of the war is psychic warfare between the Orks and the Tyranids significantly determines the output, like how the war ends. The Orks' unpredictable and often self-destructive psychic abilities create chaos on the battlefield, which sometimes works to their advantage by disrupting the Tyranid swarms. But on the other hand, the Tyranids' discipline and overwhelming psychic might directed by the hive mind often proves superior in sustained engagements, which kind of makes sense. Like, the Orks are going to kind of be like a little bit of a glass cannon with their psychic abilities, whereas the Tyranids are very controlled and steady. And so, great, yeah, you managed to create a giant Gork face that runs around smashing stuff, but the Tyranids are going to be able to dissipate that fairly consistently and with less casualties on their own side.
Yeah.
The Orcs' sheer stubbornness and resilience, combined with their ability to generate massive amounts of Y energy, make them a formidable opponent even for the highly evolved Tyranid psychers. The ongoing psychic warfare ensures that the Octarius War remains a brutal and unpredictable conflict, with neither side being able to gain a decisive upper hand. So, like, obviously, it seems quite clear that the Tyranids are going to come out ahead, as they did, because they basically won the war. But it's that Orc stubbornness of popping up again over and over again that allows them to keep maintaining their presence in the area. And I guess, like we talked about, the shadow of the warp giving them that stability to use more Y energy than they normally would be able to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a cool little section. What would you prefer to do? Weird boy powers or hive mind powers?
I think you have a better chance of not having your head explode if you go with the hive mind.
But you don't.
Depends on
have a head.
how dangerously you like to live.
Yeah.
Well, I think if you were a strategist, I think you're going to want the Tyranid ones.
Yeah.
If you're an orc, I think you're going to do the orc ones because they're more hilarious and
Pray
more
to God you
orky.
don't roll ones.
That's right.
Sorry, pray to Gork and Mork you don't roll ones.
Cool.
All right.
Well, beyond the psychic battles, we have another type of war going on. Gerald, do you want to take it away?
Sure thing. The War of Infiltration. Gene Stealer cults and hybrid orcs. One of the most insidious tactics employed by the Tyranids in the Octarius War is the use of Gene Stealer cults to infiltrate and destabilize orc society. Gene Stealers, a vanguard organism of the Tyranid hive fleets, are designed to infect and corrupt other species, creating hybrid beings that serve the hive mind. The infiltration strategy adds a layer of covert warfare to the brutal conflict. Gene Stealers are dispatched to the orc-held worlds to begin their insidious work. These creatures are adept at avoiding detection, using stealth and cunning to infiltrate orc settlements and warbands. Once embedded, they begin the process of infecting orcs with their genetic material. One notable case involves an orc war boss named Grimgor Dusniki. Unbeknownst to his followers, Grimgor is infected by a Gene Stealer patriarch. As the infection spreads, Grimgor's behavior becomes increasingly erratic and cunning, a stark contrast to typical orc brutishness. He begins to subtly influence his warband, steering them into ambushes set by the Tyranids. As the infection takes root, hybrid orcs start to appear. These hybrids possess a mix of orc and Tyranid traits, making them formidable in combat and fiercely loyal to the hive mind. They are stronger, faster, and more resilient than regular orcs, and their presence causes confusion and paranoia among the orc ranks. Cult uprisings. The Gene Stealer cults eventually revealed themselves, initiating uprisings within Orc territories. These cults cause widespread chaos as the Orcs are forced to deal with the traitors and hybrids in their midst. Battle of Blood Axe Hold. In the Blood Axe clan's stronghold, a massive uprising occurs when the Gene Stealer cult reveals itself. The cultists, led by hybrid orcs, launch a surprise attack during a Wah celebration. The ensuing battle is a bloodbath, with orcs fighting their own infected kin, while the Tyranids launch a coordinated assault from outside. The stronghold is eventually overrun, adding another victory to the Tyranid tally. Tyranids are just scoring their dubs here.
Yep.
Orc paranoia. The infiltration leads to a pervasive sense of paranoia among the orcs. War bosses become suspicious of their own followers, leading to brutal purges and intermittent conflicts. This paranoia weakens the orc defenses, making it easier for the Tyranids to launch successful attacks. Hybrid physiology and psychic resonance. The Gene Stealer infected orc hybrids inherit the psychic resonance of both their orc and Tyranid parentage. This fusion results in a unique interaction between Wah energy and the Tyranid's psychic presence.
No one's going to be able to sleep while they
I'm
hear
going to do
this
this every
episode.
time, so just let me cook here. Enhanced Wah energy. The hybrid orcs, still fundamentally orc in their mentality and social structure, generate Wah energy. However, this energy is more chaotic and unpredictable due to the influence of the Gene Stealer's genetic material. The hybrid's Wah energy can sometimes be more potent, as the Gene Stealer's traits may amplify their aggression and fervor in battle. Psychic feedback. The Tyranid influence can create a psychic feedback loop within hybrid orcs. This feedback can either enhance their Wah energy output or cause disruptive psychic phenomena. In some cases, the hybrids may exhibit unusual psychic abilities not typically seen in regular orcs, such as enhanced coordination or brief moments of synaptic clarity where they act with uncharacteristic precision and cunning. Strategic impact. The use of Gene Stealer cults as a masterstroke of Tyranid strategy, allowing them to weaken orc forces from within. The hybrids and cultists not only serve as effective shock troops, but also create internal divisions that the Tyranids exploit mercilessly. Disruption of Wah. The cult's actions disrupt the
I'm
formation.
deleting all the other wogs in this notes. They're gone. You've lost
Aw,
privileges.
You had me going there. Come on.
Now you got the energy.
Oh. The cult's action disrupt the formation of large Wah. Might as well end out strong there, preventing orcs from amassing their forces effectively. This fragmentation makes it difficult for the orcs to mount a coordinated defense against the Tyranid swarms. Intelligence gathering. The cultists provide valuable intelligence to the Tyranids, reporting on orc movements and weaknesses. This information allows the hive mind to plan its attack with surgical precision, striking where the orcs are most vulnerable.
Like they need intel. The orcs are not exactly subtle about what they're doing. Jax had a question that I was going to address anyway, so I'm glad it came up. But why don't orc Gene Stealer models exist? Simply because every race could have a Gene Stealer cult. All of them. And not only every race, but like even individual groups. So like you could have a Gene Stealer cult in like the Astra Militarum or any other like group of humanity.
Yeah.
So the problem is if you did that, there'd be so many models. That's a perfect opportunity for kit bashing, but like you can't have every single race have a contingent of models that are half. Otherwise
hybrids.
It wouldn't even look as a coherent army either, right?
Yeah.
Like it'd be weird to have like half orcs in mixed with your half humans.
Okay.
So
2
There are-
points. 1, or chaos armies. You know, chaos, space marines, demons, cultists, blah 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 blah. Point 2, people complain that there might be too many models, and yet we're okay with the infinite amount of space marine models out there that they are even still producing to this day.
yeah, but Gene Stealer cults,
Lamarty.
Gene Stealer cults is one of the smallest played factions in the game. I don't think they're going to justify. It's just there's too many. There'd be like every race. You'd have to have Eldar ones. And then would you have a whole
Crotolid,
army?
Gene Stealers, like
Yeah,
where are
Crotolid
we
Gene
at?
Stealers.
Where does it
Okay,
end?
now I do want to see that.
That's what the kit bashing is for. You buy a whole bunch of stuff and
You actually have to
smash
buy
it
2
together.
kits, and
Ah.
that's their marketing tactic.
Goodness gracious. So now we're dealing with sneaky, intelligent crocodiles that can warp into your home in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Great.
That's what I was looking for.
I have
Lucky.
seen some really good Gene Stealer Cult Orc conversions personally in real life. So it's possible.
In real life, even.
Yeah,
Who are you
like,
hanging out
in
with?
my house. It's a problem.
They're infiltrating.
So yeah, the point is though that like they can infect any culture, any group. They're gonna omniposit right in there and infect your
Yeah.
people.
It's interesting, this mix of the Tyranid energy, psychic energy, and the Wog energy, and just this unpredictableness of it that happens in these hybrids and stuff. And yeah, it's also infighting, or it's funny, like they cause all this infighting and uprising, but it's like, do the orcs really even notice what's going on? Half the time they don't. Yeah, like yeah.
It's got a whole bunch of.
I really
weird
like the
things
hybrids,
coming out
man.
of them.
What other kind of cool things were there in the hybrids? Any other kind of cool thoughts you guys had with them?
I mean, it seems like that's just again a point to what you were saying before about how they've super managed their strategy. So that they have these infiltrating things. How can you effectively mount a defense when half your people own side is converted into like a weird hybrid group of people that are
always touching you, trying to give you kisses?
and trying to omniposit you like. That there's a lot of
this is sexual
difficulty to
harassment
that.
in the hive station.
Exactly. So it just shows like how well the hive fleets are adapted, and that it was kind of inevitable that they'd win. It's like they can turn your own troops against you. It's not much you can do.
Yeah. Well, moving on to the next part, it's the Giant Order of Battle list, and I don't know if I'm going to read all this. Definitely go on to Lexicanum. I'm going to highlight some of the cool stuff, like there's Imperial Guard, Armageddon Steel Legion. There's a bunch. There's probably 20 different ones. I can't read them. Let's try to read some of them. The Tangar Woad Warriors.
Funny, my eyes went to that one too right away.
Yeah, the Woad really kind of made me feel baby-y. Oh, you're just a little Tango Woad Warrior. Okay, enough of that. Lots of different guard regiments.
Destroyans.
Like all the greats are here. Cadians, of course. I haven't heard a lot of these, like the Dark Montana Mountaineers. Like, lots of cool kind of themes you could really go with.
Yeah. And as always, there's probably
we got We got Tempestus Scions, we got Space Marines, Dark Krakens, Atlantean Spears. Man, and I'm looking at the number of Astartes in there. There's like 350 plus. There's 50 armored vehicles. Like, there's a lot of stuff. The Obsidian Jaegers, the Death Watch, and then it has a list of other chapters, and there's like probably 30 of them there, 25, including the Fire Breathers, the Forlorn Sons, or the Knights of Abhorrence. Lots of cool stuff. We also have Sisters of Battle. We have 10 different orders of Sisters of Battle there. 28 preceptories under Canonist Preceptor Sabina Helidius. 7 commanderies. They have all these kind of fun terms that I don't quite know what they mean, but they're there.
There's a lot. There's a lot of them.
Yeah. We got Adeptus Mechanicus there, including Ordinatus assets, like big old world engine type stuff. Legio Cybernetica, that's kind of cool. The Collegia Titanicas there, they have 8 Titans. I'm just going to add up all the Titans they have.
32 Titans from Legio Copides.
Yeah, over 52 Titans. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, crazy. And then we get into Knight Houses, and once again, we have just rough math here. There's almost 2,000 knights running around.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I've always kind of wondered about Knight Houses and how big they really are, and I've never really seen a lot of numbers, and this is a good thing to go off. Like, okay,
Yeah,
you can kind of understand the range.
High
And-
King Eustace Crine with 622 knights.
And that's not necessarily all he had.
Yeah, that's true. That's just what
Yeah.
showed up.
That's just what was there.
Yeah.
Granted, if that was a home world in that system, it probably was all, but
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you got Imperial Navy assets, battleships, cruisers, all that kind of good stuff. The Aeronautica, which is the Aero Naval.
the Air Force.
You got all those different kind of cool things. Flame Falcons, Brazen Eagles, Wind Wardens. Rogue Traders make their appearance in there. There's a fun little scene there with some Rogue Traders getting up to shenanigans. There's just everything, man. There's all types of things that you can think of. Jumping over to the Orcs, it was kind of interesting how they laid this out. You got a core WOG of 126 big mobs. Then you got Iron Mountains, and they had a gargantuan mob. And you got some Goths, and they had a 15 big mobs. And, just a lot of mobs. The Goths kill mob had 12 mobs, and Air Squarmadon.
Look at the
There's
Grot
just some
hordes.
boys there.
Mark, look at the Grot hordes. How many Grot hordes are there?
Lots of
Grot
grots.
hordes. Lots of grots. Yeah, fuck, that's
It's a good bit. It's a good bit.
The Tyranid High Fleet, there's untold trillions of different organisms. Gene Stealer cultists, and you'd have human Gene Stealer cultists. You could even have some Eldar Gene Stealer cultists kicking about in this area, potentially doing some stuff. All types of assets they would have.
Okay, one
Chaos.
thing to note.
Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, one thing to note. Okay, we're listing off like all these major Imperium factions and Night Houses, Space Marine chapters, like the whole kit and caboodle. With the Tyranids, it's just Hive Fleet Leviathan. Just Hive Fleet Leviathan.
Yeah.
Just to put this all in perspective.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, that's like our designation. Like as the Imperium has we divide things into regiments for command purposes. But if you're a Tyranid, you don't need to divide things into groups, right? It's just
We are one.
you're sending parts of your body.
Sending
It's
the High Fleet.
like the cells in your body. You don't really care if you're scratching something that you're losing skin cells.
But fair point. James compliments. Ha
Thanks.
ha ha ha. Each Hive Fleet does have a preferred function. So what's to say you couldn't have Hive Fleet Behemoth or Hive Fleet Kraken in on there too? This is all just one Hive Fleet that's doing all of this damage.
Yeah. And I don't even know if it is the biggest one. I think maybe it is actually, but either way, there's a lot of these things in the galaxy right now, and it's not good.
Yeah, it's not necessarily all of that high feed either.
Yeah, geez. So we jump into the Chaos Forces. We mentioned some core and stuff. The one thing that I liked was Beastmen. We don't really see a lot of Beastmen, but Gene Stealer Beastmen. That's fucked.
That's 3 levels of hybrid there.
Yeah, man.
I don't like that.
Human,
No.
goat, Tyranid.
Bug. Yeah, perfect.
You could model that. They have a kill team for Beastmen.
do.
You could make that happen.
You can make anything happen with some putty and a knife.
And the desire. Jeez. And then we also got some other forces. Like I mentioned, they had Eldar there. They had Samhain, Bealtan, and the Dragon Dancers, Corsairs. They also had some Dark Eldar. Like I said, if you want to read more, just go into there. There's a lot, and then you can click on all of it and learn.
Everyone
a bunch
but
of
the
cool
Necron
stuff.
shows up. And the Tau.
Yeah, Necron, Tau. Yeah, maybe if we want to count Leagues of Votan as a thing, they don't show
We don't.
up.
We don't count.
Yeah.
They were still in the center of the galaxy, getting all squished.
Compressed.
They weren't fully baked yet.
They're still not fully baked.
Oh,
Taking shots. All right. Let's look at the aftermath of the Octarius War, a grim reckoning. The Octarius War, a colossal clash between the Orks and Tyranids, left an indelible mark on the sector and beyond. The conflict's aftermath was a tapestry of devastation, both for the warring factions and the Imperium, as each side grappled with the results of their grim, unrelenting struggle. The war's outcomes painted a stark picture of the galaxy's brutal reality, revealing both the harsh lessons learned and the bleak victories achieved. From the Orks, gains and losses. From the Orcs' perspective, the aftermath of the Octarius War was a paradox of victory and ruin. The Overfiend's campaign had been a significant expansion of Orc-held territory. Had been a brutal testament of the Orc prowess and aggression, resulting in significant expansion of Orc-held territory. The war had allowed the Orcs to consolidate control over several key worlds within the sector, and their dominance over the region was cemented through sheer force and unrelenting conflict. However, the cost of these gains was immense. The Orcs suffered staggering casualties throughout the war. The Tyranid's relentless assault had exacted a heavy toll on the Orc forces, depleting their numbers and resources. The sectors under Orc control were left in a state of near perpetual conflict with constant internal strife and the need for continued warfare to maintain dominance. The Overfiend's injuries sustained in the climactic battles left a power vacuum that led to further internal struggle and fragmentation within Orc leadership. So just like the collapse of the Orc Empire and then a bunch of like infighting between minor warlords. The Octarius War underscored the Orcs' inherent resilience and adaptability. Their ability to harness sheer aggression and brute force proved effective in overcoming significant threats. However, the war also highlighted their limitations of Orc strategy, just charging at your enemy and hoping for the best, and the cost of unchecked warfare. The relentless nature of the Tyranid assault exposed vulnerabilities in Orc logistics and coordination, forcing them to adapt to their strategies and fortify their positions. For the Orcs, the conflict was a brutal reminder of the importance of unity and strategic adaptation. The ongoing internal strife in the Overfiend's weakened state showed the necessity of stable leadership and effective resource management. Despite their victories, the Orcs faced a grim reality of perpetual warfare and constant threat of internal collapse.
Is that grim for them? I feel like that's what they do anyway.
Yeah. Perpetual conflict is maybe not such a dark reality.
No, that's just like...
Nice.
That's like
that's the best outcome they could have come from.
Exactly. Perpetual war. They don't even have to go anywhere. They just
the war comes to us.
Yeah, they fight.
We don't have to go find it.
Imagine if your vacation came to you.
That's nice.
That is
Imagine if you came vacation to me, though. Now that's even better.
Yeah. Right. From the Tyranid side, the Tyranids emerged from the Octarius War with the horrifyingly successful campaign of consumption. The sector, once teeming with life, was reduced to a barren wasteland stripped of its resources and inhabitants. The High Fleets achieved their primary objective of consuming vast swaths of the sector, adding to their ever-expanding biomass and furthering their insatiable hunger. Yet, the war was not without significant losses for the Tyranids either. The conflict of the Orcs proved to be more challenging than anticipated. The High Fleets faced fierce resistance and suffered considerable casualties, particularly in protracted engagements with the Orc warbands. The cost of the war included the depletion of some of their bioengineered organisms and significant damage to their High Fleets. So I know Tyranids are kind of seen as like completely invulnerable, but it does take time and energy to consume and create. So even though they will just reabsorb all the biomass that they lost, it still takes time for them to regenerate, right? So depending on someone's ability to capitalize on this, if they go after a High Fleet in a weakened state, they might actually be able to do some damage, some lasting damage. The war taught the Tyranids the value of adaptability in the face of unexpected resistance. The relentless Orc aggression forced the High Fleets to adjust their strategies and improve their tactics in combat. The conflict underscored the need for continuous evolution and refinement of their bioengineered organisms to counter formidable adversaries. Additionally, the Tyranids learned the importance of managing the resources and High Fleets efficiently. The costs incurred during the war highlighted the need to be more calculated in their approach to consumption, ensuring future campaigns are better managed and more strategically planned to minimize losses.
Yeah. So the thing with the Tyranids is, I think there is an expectation that like if they lose a lot of biomass in wars, it's not just that they can just eat everything, maybe, or at least there's a cost to war that isn't just, oh, okay, we won the battle and killed all the enemies that are stopping us, so therefore we can just eat everything. It does seem like there's an implication that fighting battles does slow them down, not just in time.
Yeah. If you look at things from a physics perspective too, like every system kind of bleeds energy. And so the energy is infinite.
Yeah.
Right. So like even in the process, I'm sure something is lost in the process of regenerating biomass and creating new organisms.
Or maybe it's just at least converting matter into other forms that they can't use.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like there's always going to be, unless it's a perfectly efficient machine, which is impossible. I don't know about 40K, but is impossible in reality.
It's implied it's impossible.
Yeah.
So.
that there would be some bleed off effect that like eventually in theory you could drain a hive fleet of resources over a long enough time.
Yeah.
And by depleting enough resources.
Or but that just forcing them to feed more resources into battles, because like every one of these planets that they can't take because the orcs are still there
is a loss.
It's just but they're not only losing the resources they're sending there, or they're losing the resources fighting there, they're losing resources by sending more to it. So it's just like a hole that they keep losing resources to.
Yeah, exactly. That they're not recovering.
Yeah. And every planet that got blown up by the Rowdy War is resources they didn't take.
Yeah,
so
that's true too.
there's lots of levels to it.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like a calculus that a predator makes when they go after prey. Like if I expend all my energy catching this small prey that's really fast, it's not worth the meal once I get it.
Yeah.
Because you lost so much energy trying to catch it, right? So like if a lion chases a rabbit and let's say he does finally catch the rabbit, but he expended more energy than what's in the rabbit when he actually eats the rabbit, he's actually going to still starve to death.
Yeah.
Whereas
Christian, when you're hunting the wild, what's your return ratio on that? Are you making a calorie deficit, or is it a good return for puma
it's
hunting?
a good return because I hunt at Walmart. And get my groceries.
Yes. Pre-hunting, they call that.
Yeah. So I never go hungry.
Ah,
It's a return on
perfect. Okay.
investment.
That's nice. Yeah, and like, just that waste of resources. Like, you got to tell me that when an orc explodes in a giant flash of light, that biomass
Isn't lost, yeah.
isn't lost,
It's vaporized.
So, yeah.
All right. Now, the Imperial perspective. For the Imperium, the Octarius War was a grim spectacle of suffering and loss. The sector's devastation was profound, with entire worlds falling into ruin. The Imperium's involvement was limited, but the indirect impact was severe as the war diverted crucial resources and attention away from other fronts. The constant warfare and the unrelenting advance of the Tyranids and Orcs left the sector in a state of near total collapse. I know we kind of skipped over the amount of resources the Imperium had invested in this conflict, but when you look at the scale of the Imperium as well, this is just drops in the bucket. So it's a lot, but not.
Well, and the other thing too is that there's always wars sucking resources. So it's like, what do you mean it's sucking resources from where? Like just other fights? There's always more fights, and they're everywhere. And
Sure,
they're constant,
but being strategic about where you're putting your guys, especially for the Imperium, right? Like again, resources are not infinite. There are a lot, but they're not infinite. So you got to pick your battles.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Despite the dire situation, there were some strategic gains for the Imperium. The war highlighted the resilience of Imperial forces and their ability to withstand significant threats. The conflict also provided valuable intelligence on both Orc and Tyranid tactics, which could be used to inform future strategies and defenses. And overall, it just underscored the importance of vigilance and preparedness in the face of existential threats, a lesson that the Imperium is very much familiar with. The sheer scale of conflict demonstrated the need for the Imperium to maintain a robust and adaptable military strategy capable of responding to multifaceted threats of both Xenos and internal factions. The Octarius War was revealed. The Octarius War also revealed the necessity of resource allocation and strategic planning. The Imperium's ability to manage its forces and resources was tested, highlighting areas of improvement of logistical support and intersector coordination. The war left a sector scarred by a brutal reality of the conflict. The Orcs emerged with expanded territory, but faced internal strife and the constant need for warfare. The Tyranids achieved their goal of consumption, but at a significant cost, learning the importance of adaptation and resource management. And the Imperium, though indirectly involved, faced a harsh reminder of the galaxy's unyielding brutality and need for constant vigilance and preparedness. Really, the Imperium probably lost the most, ironically enough, out of all of this, if you think about it.
Yeah. Maybe relatively.
Yeah, I'm not talking like body count. I'm just talking about.
No, I just mean like because they have the least to lose. Because the Orcs don't really lose anything.
No. Well, they lose territory in there.
Yeah, but that doesn't seem to really matter.
Yeah, like they don't need to hold territory necessarily.
They don't extract resources in this. I don't know. They just seem to have a different economy.
Yeah, and reason for existing, right? Like if your whole purpose is for fighting, then that is the achievement of your objective. It doesn't matter if you're part of an empire, if you're by yourself in a forest.
It just as long as the biggest fight, and this was the biggest fight. So I don't know. They have a different calculus, and the Tyranids won. So it's a little harder to like gauge like what does it mean for them as far as how much did they consume versus lose.
How much they lost.
And there's no way of recording that because they don't like there's
Publish
no
statistics.
scales for that, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, ultimately, then the real losers were humanity.
Well,
as
it's the
always.
only reason that it comes across that way is because they're the only ones recording
What's
losses.
going on?
They don't-
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It just feeds.
Yeah,
into the-
it's a crazy war, really. And I just remember this years ago having such a interesting potential outcome, and then reading through it and be like, GW, sons of bitches, you did it to me again. You pulled the old switcheroo. You tried to write a narrative story without actually telling a story from start to finish. They wrote a story and they left us in the exact same boat as they put us in the first place. So the war is still ongoing. You know, whoever wins, it's going to be the big bad. The Imperium's struggling. And it's just kind of
well, I don't know if
It's
that's
cool
completely
and
fair.
it's-
I don't know if that's completely fair because the Tyranids did win. It's ongoing, but not really. Like they're still fighting in that area, but the war is over. Imperium is out. The Tyranids control the area except for like sporadic spores popping up. I think you can call it. It's basically over.
Yeah, I suppose maybe I'm being too grumpy on it.
I don't know.
Maybe
think you
I
can
was just
count it.
expecting more. Like, you know, there was rumors or whatever, and about Primorks coming out of this conflict and stuff. Like, I just would have liked to see something actually happen. Like, yeah, okay, so we lost territory. Yeah, there's some things, but like nothing really new came of it. Nothing really crucial. Like, it's
Yeah.
just the war
It-
happened, and it happened.
When did this get written? Like the end of it?
recently.
Was it recent?
Yeah, well, like I think that the Octarius War we can Google, but like within the last 3 years.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah, it goes back to the.
But I
same-
remember reading about this like decades ago.
Yeah, the setup for it. The problem with it
Yeah.
is it just goes back to that freaking. Like they have to reset the status quo. It's like when you watch a TV show like The Simpsons that's episodic. Like everything always has to end up back to where it was when everything started, so that they can start the next episode. And like so many 40K novels and stories go into that mode because they can't really push the narrative further without screwing up like the whole setup for the tabletop. Now, yes, there are very specific exemptions to that, like the overall pushing into the Indominus Crusade and that stuff, but that's like really big picture stuff.
I don't know if it's necessarily. It's hard to walk the balance because at the same time, I feel like people complain when the narrative is advanced. So
yeah, I would. Yes.
Yeah.
So like, what is the optimal solution to that? Is like, okay, this war has an effect, but it can't affect the setting.
I think the optimal solution is continue to set up sandboxes for us to play in. They did a great job 10 years ago, 20 years ago, developing this little sandbox in 40K of Orks and Tyranids and the potential outcomes and all these battles. And they built this spot that we could then play in.
So just not resolve the war ever?
Yeah, well, it goes back to the whole thing about.
No, I think just come up with different things. Like, I never want to hear about Octarius War again. We don't need another campaign book. Come up with something else. Give us a new sandbox to play in. This sandbox was sweet, and you opened it up, you flipped it all over, and you poured some sand out, and now it's a mess everywhere. I can't really play in it anymore.
Fair enough.
So for me personally, I've always been the setting guy and a codex guy over novels and like the story, just because, you know, I love just getting in there and doing my own thing with whatever I just read about, you know?
Yeah. It's the age-old debate of 40K being a setting versus a story. And like I brought this up in episodes before too, where like, what is it really? And 40K shines best as a setting.
Yeah.
Now that being said, I think you can do stories well. And I think you can do conclusive stories when you keep them small enough that like you care about individual characters, you can tell their complete arcs. But they just don't seem to want to do that. So
yeah, and like even the characters in this, like, okay, so we got the Swarm Lord, he's immortal, he can die a billion times, doesn't really matter. We got the Overfiend. Well, guess what? That's a title, so it doesn't matter that he's dead because the next Warlord's gonna take that title, and we got the Overfiend again. And then, you know, we got Gazkill. Yeah, Kryptman is still alive. Gazkill shows up, makes an appearance, and then bounces. And like, you know, he was one of the few. There's many characters that show up and do a similar thing where it's just, what are we writing about? What's actually happening? You're just kind of, closing sandboxes on me. really, I feel like, is what happened with this.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I man, GW, if you listen, let me write for you.
Let us.
Yeah. Yeah, because like I love the sandbox idea, Mark. I totally agree with you of like building setups and then letting people play in those setups. And then like having character, like don't get like 40K is not meant to be character driven. You can have cool characters drop in, but don't love them so much that they can never die. And then you could have a whole like marketing scheme around releasing heroes and new characters year over year, right? Like you could have infinite releases.
Every new book or every new year, you come up with this new campaign that like sets up this cool, has a bunch of mysteries involved, couple plot hooks that never
New
gets
characters,
resolved.
yeah.
New characters, and yeah, it never gets resolved, but it gives you all this information to do what you want with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think we got some closing thoughts here if we want to go through them real quick. We're at the end of the notes. I think my closing thought for the day was war never ends. It only changes battlefields. This was one of those wars that was supposed to be eternal, but it's just another time things have more moved from setting to the narrative, but at the same time they don't have the balls to actually change anything. It's kind of my critique of it.
Yeah. And if they did, like if they were going to conclude it, then like come up with the prime arc that comes out of it, or come up with the Tyranid super organism.
Exactly.
Like release something big.
Like a loss of territory doesn't matter because it doesn't mean anything to us. Infinite planets, like you can lose as much territory essentially, and it will never break the my immersion level.
Yeah,
you could take away almost infinite amount. Where like it would be cool to incorporate something, the next little timbit of something.
Yeah, and again, just opportunity for marketing. Okay, cool. Now you got new models you can release, right? Like for me,
James, you're frowning over there at us. He hates us.
No, I see why you guys are complaining. It does feel like a little bit of a damp squib of a storyline. Like it ends in just like
a wet fart.
Doesn't really matter. But
yeah,
I do wonder how you could exit it without it feeling that way.
Just don't.
I mean, the Tyranids win.
Yeah, like
that's the
like
way.
If it was me in the notes,
there was
a very specific time there that they set up the climax of the war, and just like you shouldn't watch past Infinity Wars in Marvel movies, like there's a climax and you got to get out then, and that's the spot where I would have ended it. This is where the Overfiend was wounded and the Swarm Lord maybe is missing. It gives you the option maybe to then battle for position of being the new Warlord of Octavius, the new Overfiend, if you're an Orc player, and you can play that out in your own mind all day long. And I would kind of leave it at that climax where it's like, we don't know where this is going. We really don't. And that's how they had it.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I have been more of a narrative focused person when it comes to the lore, so like I really like the 30K novels and all the flow, because it does have a beginning and an end, and things are shaping up towards that end. So I could hear what you're saying though about leaving it in a state of sandbox once you get to the climax. I think we could agree on that.
Yeah,
state of tension.
Cool.
State of tension. Yeah. Gerald bounced on us. He is recording a Grimlore episode. He'd left a couple minutes ago and didn't want to interrupt, but his thoughts on this was, if you want to look at any point that fulfills the tagline of in the grim darkness of the far future, the Octarius War, along with the siege of Varax and the fall of Cadia, serve as a point that you look at in the setting to showcase how brutal and terrifying the galaxy can be. It is also a point toward the road to hell being paved with good intentions. Looking at you, Kryptman, with such horrific calls being made for the sake of getting some sort of results. Just any results.
Cool.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Like, this is another one of those key battles of 40K where it's this never-ending war. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's kind of that. Do you guys have any other thoughts?
No, I think we're good.
Sweet. I think we're ready to go into that call-in section. So I sent out some links to some people. Cool. So if you have gotten those links, just hop into that. Okay. Yeah, join them in.
What's up?
Hello.
How's it going?
Good. I'm just underneath the house because my daughter's still awake, so I didn't want her to enter in a podcast about killing people, you know. I thought I'd be a
fair.
proper father figure.
Yeah. You're still waiting on the official Dad Hammer episode before you introduce the children. We get that.
So, what did you think of the Octavius War?
The episode. I joined in, I will say, like 30 minutes into the episode, so I missed like the build up and stuff. But I remember you like slightly talking about it before on like previous episodes, if I'm right. I can't remember. I feel like you touched on it a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to go like over what Mark was talking about like it being a setting. I remember it would have been like early 2000s. White Dwarf had like that campaign, the worldwide campaign. I think I have a feeling it was like the 13th Black Crusade or something like that. They should have kind of done the same thing. I feel like have it as like a campaign where it goes like it's all determined by people playing games and they just add to the story that way rather than like changing things suddenly.
You know, they've tried that a bunch and it always ends so horribly where you get funny moments like orc war bosses punching demon princes to death and then fleeing the battlefield. And, you know, you can get some fun moments for sure of how that would play out. It would be cool if they did more of those kind of international type things, really.
Yeah, it was a good. I guess now though, there's like way more players than there were back in like the early 2000s. But I guess now you have more control over it with the internet. Like they could censor things out that don't make sense or that kind of thing.
They always did. They did in the past also. They kind of went into those campaigns because I remember they did it with the 13th Black Crusade and they also did it with the Fall of Medusa campaign.
That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one I was trying to remember.
Yeah. And I believe if I recall correctly, that GW actually did manipulate the stats because they actually already had a story they wanted to tell and they made people feel like they were influencing the story, but they tweaked things mid-campaign to do what they wanted to do anyway, so it kind of backfired.
Oh, so there's no point in the whole thing, I guess.
But I do love it conceptually, and I wish they would actually just like go with whatever happened and have the fans have some input in.
They did that sort of with Leviathan a little bit, like whoever won, you were supposed to play one game with the Leviathan box and then record who won, and then they added them all up to see who won that campaign.
That's cool. Okay.
Yeah,
and they're still doing some stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's fun too.
Yeah.
Makes you feel like you're part of the universe.
Yeah. It'd be tough though if you had like named characters as well. Like that would be because they have so many named characters now, and no one really builds their own. Like if you want to win a game, you have to use the main character these days. So like having one of them die would just ruin any story.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory, you could take like the amalgam of deaths and just say they were wounded, right? Like it doesn't mean they.
You can lose one arm a lot of times after it becomes bionic.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, they just replace the eye. They have two hearts for a reason, I guess.
The other difficulty with this specifically as a campaign would be like the emphasis on just 2/3 factions, whereas typically those global campaigns they try to incorporate all the factions to get all the players involved.
Well, they did it. That's how they did it with Leviathan, though. It was just Tyranids and Space.
Yeah, but that was with the release of the new box.
I'm just saying it's possible.
Okay, James. Okay.
Fight! You're in the same room. Fists can fly.
You're next to each other. Exactly.
Cool. Yeah, that's interesting. I would love to see more stuff like that, even though I'm not playing and stuff, but any type of interaction, even just what we're doing, the four of us right now, just talking 40K, you know, it just is better for the universe.
I feel like you could probably as well, like your card game, have the same thing, but just with members of the Discord and do it that way. Then it's like less people and you can kind of control it in a way that you want to rather than being determined by GW.
Well, the only problem with that is that we know how that all ends with the Emperor.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other quick thought there, Ursats, or we'll jump to the next guy?
I think you can let someone else have a turn.
Thank you for joining us, man.
Thanks for joining us.
Support.
See ya.
See ya.
All right. So up next we got Jax.
And-
Hey, welcome to the show.
Another
Oh,
James.
Yeah.
Hello, how's it going?
Good,
Oh,
good.
man.
I'm the original James and the sniffer of Slanesh, so
I'm
What do you
James
have for us?
2.0.
2.0.
Oh,
Primaris
Improved.
James.
I don't know.
God damn. Now there's
There's-
two of them.
the firstborn James. That's what they call me.
This is getting out of hand. Now there's two of them.
That's right.
Anyway, the one question I had was it worth it in the end for the Tyranids? Like, did they get more biomass, or like was winning actually like a win for them?
Yeah, I would say it was. Like they weren't halted. They weren't turned away. You know, their fleet is still there, and as long as the fleet isn't destroyed, it's ultimately a win for the Tyranids.
Yeah, how much
You
of a
know.
cost of victory, right, is the
Yeah.
question, and we really
Yeah,
can't quantify
pretty much.
that.
Yeah, like and they do that cost way different than we do, because we put value on like human life or holding resource points for mining, where you know they just operate in such a different way that
Well, I think you could make the argument that if they spent more resources taking the area than they got, that would be considered not worth it for them.
not ideal.
Okay.
Or if they can't advance, because like we were talking about, if there's orcs still there slowing them down, that means that they can't leave. Or maybe they could leave.
Yeah.
I think
And they
parts
just
of them
not.
would leave, and then parts would stay behind. Because again, like
If they keep having to feed it though, or if they keep choosing to feed it.
sure, but a
that
river
is-
can split, right?
Sure,
Yeah.
but they're still
Yeah.
sending resources into it. So I guess
Yeah.
it depends. And there's no logistics that are recorded for the Tyranids. So you
Yeah.
never know.
Yeah.
Oh, am I muted? Oh,
No,
sorry.
you're good.
Yeah. Interesting. And the other question I kind of had was, would Octarius kind of be the new Armageddon, or what was that place in the Crusade pre-heresy era where the Emperor and Horus fought all the
Ulanor.
orcs?
Yeah.
Ulanor. Would that basically be the new holy ground for the orcs? 'Cause
I
they
definitely
put
like
such a
that
huge
like
fight.
Armageddon thought kind of more than the Ulanor one, of just kind of the next big bad orc invasion that's happening, you know. Because
Well,
Armageddon kind of winded down there a little bit.
Well, I think the
Yeah.
whole thing with Armageddon though is that's like supposedly the birthplace of orcs, isn't it? So that's why they keep coming back. It's like their holy ground for that reason, not just
Really?
because
Yeah.
not just because it was
Oh,
a big
that's cool.
battle.
It's implied. It's not like
It's not
Sure,
confirmed, sure,
yeah.
but
That's orc lore.
it's never confirmed.
Yeah.
So I think that's why Armageddon is always special. So I
Mhm.
don't think it'll become Armageddon for that reason.
But could it be where, like,
not
it would
really
be
saying.
nice if that's where they took it, but you know, as like a place for a cool new warlord. Again, like the payoff for the fans is like not really there. Like, do we get a new cool Tyranid feature? Do we get a new orc warlord out of it? No, not really. So-
They could still, I don't know, they still could.
yeah, but now it's just little war bands fighting each other. It's not the
But
same.
but if one were to come and say, okay, I'm uniting all that,
sure, and have a new gas cold type thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
you could still do it.
They're not gonna, but it'd be
Probably
it would be nice.
Don't worry,
You never
boys. We're
know.
building
They
an
dug-
army, and one day we will march on GW. Just give
They're-
it time.
They have dug up weird
Riot
Lord
boys.
of the Pole characters out of, so
Cool thoughts. You got anything else, or
There was one, but I kind of lost it. But oh, hold on. Let's see if I
On to
wrote
the
it down
warp.
somewhere. Hold on. Where
checking
was
his
it?
arm? Like, where the fuck did he write this down?
Like,
Checking under the
yeah,
mattress. now.
not. Yeah.
Mom, have
Uh,
notebook?
Dang, I had a good one. I think it was about Yark and stuff, but like a Yark cameo. Oh wait, never mind. This one's more personal. But if you could like do like a Tyranid sandbox anywhere else, like where would it be? Like, how would it play out?
Yeah. Like, I think we touched on something very interesting with that Tyranid is in the webway type concept, and like, what does that war look like? How does that play out? So maybe that would be something I would like to see kind
Yeah,
of
what
going
if-
forward.
what if a swarm
like a
gets trapped in
Kamara?
the way?
Yeah, like, you know, they have invaded Kamra, but Kamra is a little different than the webway. You know, it is, and it's in the webway, but it's maintained, maybe is the way to say it, you know? Yeah, so, you know, Tyranids have invaded Cormorant before, and like Space Marines have too, but it's different than the webway when it's like this maze and it can change and shift and you can alter it psionically and all that kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah, and it's not all populated, so
Yeah.
there's pockets of like wild space, right? Like,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that
No,
was
cool
all
thoughts,
I pretty
cool
much
thoughts.
had.
I love it. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining and supporting the show by being a Patreon member. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. See you guys later.
Adios. Well, boys, we did it. That's another episode of Lorehammer. I learned a lot. There's a lot of cool stuff that kind of really I enjoyed in this episode, without getting lost in the weeds of just, you know, violence.
We did a summary. We did a bird's eye view.
Yeah, man. Yeah. All right, let's get through the end notes and call it a wrap. Check out the last episode we did for more information on the Warlords of Old Terra Magic the Gathering deck, and check out Gothic Garnish on Instagram. He's the guy doing the artwork, and just 10 out of 10, man. Truly, when dealing with him, I thought of this. It's interesting, different levels of art. Because when I went in there and I was fucking around with AI images, it was not art. But when he does it, it's art. And, you know, it's really cool to see when people's passion and quality of work really bleed through. So I'm excited for that. Don't forget to come check out Lorehammer Listener Lore. Me and Gerald are rocking out episodes every now and again of that. If you want to submit to that, lorehammerpodcast@gmail.com. I'm still undecided if we want to do the Warlords of Terra lore round robin on Listener Lore or on Lorehammer Main. But, you know, we have a couple. I think the cutoff date is August 9th to submit. So submit by then, and we'll figure out where it goes. You boys, what do you got for me?
yeah, if you're interested in my work, I have the Star Lores podcast, the Star Lores. You can check us out. Me and Jordan are on there.
Yeah.
I think we try to get episodes out at least twice a month.
Yeah, and check out Christian's OnlyFans, Star Whores.
Not supposed to tell people yet till I'm ready to launch.
Slightly different content, but still good.
But still good. Yeah, but if you enjoy Star Wars, kind of check us out there. Download a couple episodes. Give us a follow.
Yeah. I'll give out a shout out for Grimlore. Great podcast. Gerald's a fun guy. Go check out, if you like Age of Sigmar type stuff, fantasy stuff, go check out Grimlore. And now we got Vacation James. You know how much
James,
hatred we got last week?
we got a good chunk. Yeah, at jamescomplaints@gmail.com. I know some of the complaints are about the fact that we said Hotmail. That's what Marcus told me. So I'm gonna
Redirect
forward
that hate mail
all
to
the way
Mark.
there.
Dumb,
But remember,
dumb
if you
bitch.
have complaints, they all go to jamescomplaints@gmail.com. I love them. I read them. I expect 500 words and nothing but vitriol. And speaking of which, I do have one that I would like to share with you at the ending of this stream here. I won't give out I never give out who they're from because that's my policy, but I will read this one because it was lovely. Hello, you lovely gentlemen and Christian. Thanks to your podcast, which I discovered during the first lockdown, I got into Warhammer and learned a lot about the wonderful lore, but that's enough friendliness for this email. I have 3 is crossed out 4 complaints. James announced the email address is janecomplaints@hotmail.com multiple times. Unfortunately, this email address does not exist. I had to ask an actual competent member of the Discord to get this email address. Going on.
That was
Why?
me. He came to the guy who gave the wrong information to get the information. Idiot.
Why did you dickheads have to stop recording new episodes right when I caught up with episode 100? Mark thought he had made enough Lorehammer bucks to stop working, didn't he? Everybody knows that Panama doesn't exist. Why lie? What lies are you telling us next? That you are living in an imaginary country like Canada? Noise complaint. I listened to episode 103 while driving, and due to the decent background noise cars make at 180 kilometers an hour on the Autobahn, I had to turn up the volume to hear her better. But since James was way too quiet and Christian was way too loud, I could not hear James or have my eardrums burst every time Christian speaks. I hope you chose the correct answer, which was listen to me and not Christian.
Yeah.
Christian Speaks doesn't have anything to do with the volume, but please fix this in the next episode. We probably won't. Christian,
The irony is we both speak on the same mic,
we're
so
on
I
the
don't,
same mic.
I don't even know.
How could none of you make the very obvious barbaric pun while talking about barbarics? My disappointment was immeasurable and my day was ruined. Keep up the good work and let me know if the next complaint needs to be more passive aggressive. Until next week. So here's the thing. It does need to be more passive aggressive. That was much too friendly. But you did more than 500 words, so I felt good reading it. I appreciate your complaint. It'll be filed away with all the other ones into the trash bin.
Perfect. I feel satisfied.
I do read all the complaints, and they're awesome. I love them.
And hurtful.
The funniest are just the amount of messages where I just get fuck Christian.
It's James complaints, people. That's my complaint.
Oh man, you can say that if it's over 500 words, I'll read it. No, I read them all,
Jeez.
but I will only add them to the episode if they're over 500.
Yeah. Well, that's that. We have some now thank yous to our Patreon members. Seriously, everyone, thank you for supporting the reboot. I've felt like this was definitely the right move. Felt very supported, and like you guys really wanted us back, so that's nice. Go join our Patreon, Lorehammer, and throw us a couple bucks. You can join the live stream. You might get maybe discounts on merchandise eventually. Just go check it out. You know, it's constantly changing, so support the shows that you love. Otherwise, they disappear back into Panama.
All right. You want me to literally shout these out, especially after that
No,
complaint?
don't shout.
Yeah, give us like a WOG type energy of these.
I won't do that. People are probably just going to sleep at the end of the episode here.
Yeah.
All right. We got Rival, Genebus, Isaac, John, David, Jasmine, Pigman, Crispy Taco, Killian, DJ Miller, Question Everything, Lady, Chris, Rambo, Anna, Anon, Kamza, John, Justin, Slogan, Trophies, WYK, Mog, Udi Hawk, Travis, John, Firos, Jacob, Liquid Poo, KJ, Chado, and Daniel. So thank you all very much for supporting the show.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, like seriously, thank you guys. I have dreams, man, and I just dream about doing a lot more Lorehammer content. You know, we have big goals of we want to try to start some YouTube channel and do hobby nights, video game streaming. But that all comes from the support of the Patreon members. James and Christian, they have full-time jobs. I'm a homeless bum essentially in Panama, so I operate a little differently. But we want to make sure everyone's getting paid and happy so we can keep making more episodes. Next episode, I'm not sure what we're doing. I was almost thinking, it needs to be a Dark Eldar episode, so maybe as Badul Vect. But maybe everyone start messaging me. What would you like to hear about Dark Eldar? Give me your thoughts. Well, now we all do the thing. We all hold hands as we once were, and we say goodbye to our friends for the week. Thank you for the knowledge that we have taken, and only war remains.
Sweet dreams.
All right,
Sweet
bye,
dreams.
everyone.